Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Becomes a Bartender Part 2. Chapter 7. He did it. The barrier that had been used to protect Kuoh from damage had exploded into shards as it cracked under the sudden pressure and power of Juggernaut Drive. Luckily they were shielded by a timely barrier from Grafia. What was that? Rhea shouted in shock at their barrier suddenly cracking. Grafia, get our sisters out of there, he has activated Juggernaut Drive. Serziches quickly relayed to his mate. It will be done, she replied calmly before creating a teleportation circle underneath them. Grafia, we cannot leave. It's our town, we have to protect it. Rhea shouted at the mate as she refused to leave her area. Rhea's, he has activated Juggernaut Drive. Your town may not be standing at the end of the day. Serziches and Serafall cannot fight to their best if they are worrying about their sisters. We are leaving and there will be no arguing, Grafia replied calmly, determined to carry out her order. Before Rhea's could retort, her childhood friend clasped her shoulder, standing her down. She is right, this fight is out of our league. We can no longer protect our town, but your brother and my sister can on our behalf, but they cannot protect it if they are worrying about us, Sona reasoned with her friend, who grit her teeth in a mixture of anger and annoyance. Rhea's. The exorcist won't survive at this rate. She needs proper medical attention. Akeno, who was healing Zenobia, informed her king, and this was one more reason for them to leave the area. Grafia summoned a large teleportation circle beneath them as a large roar followed before they disappeared in a flash of red light. Issei's form was distorted, he was now a hulking mess of limbs and large wings, while where his mouth would be there was a massive set of sharpened teeth. A distorted and blood-curdling scream emerged from his mouth, a testament to the amount of anger and pain he was experiencing. The Kabiel was cackling with joy, finally a fight worth his full might. While the leaders of the three factions watched on tense, Serzich's expression becoming grim, as did Serafall's. Gabriel attempted to deny it, but she was no fool, she knew if Issei would not snap out of Juggernaut Drive, they would have to kill him. Vali almost seemed disappointed, if his rival would not snap out of Juggernaut Drive, then they would have their battle early, a fight he sought to fight in the future, where they would be more powerful. The Kabiel flew up, spreading his wings and throwing out his arms as light swords formed around him. All poised to strike down the enraged dragon, he snapped his fingers as the swords flew towards him, covering the area in explosions of holy energy. The dust haze began filling the battlefield before the enraged howling of angry beast echoed. Azazel, Serziches, Serafall, help me set up a barrier, Michael requested as he threw his arms out, and a golden bubble began expanding to surround them and the general area. The three leaders and Gabriel immediately added their own might to barrier, reinforcing it. Rainer, Kalwerner, leave, this fight is out of your league, Azazel ordered his subordinates. Rainer was going to retort, but a sharp look from Azazel silenced her, while Kalwerner nodded and accepted his order. Yes sir, she began summoning a teleportation circle. Rainer glanced desperately at Issei, who was enraptured in his own anger and pain. She prayed for him to be safe as they were promptly teleported away. He shook his head, the argument he had with Rainer still fresh in his mind, but he turned back to focus on the barrier. What's the plan then? Azazel asked Michael as they held up the barrier. We have to weaken him before we can subdue him, Michael replied. How do you suggest we do that? Serziches asked. The sudden unfurling of wings drew their attention. As Vali smirked as they gazed upon Divine Dividing. The White Dragon Emperor, so this was your trump card, Azazel. Serafall added her thoughts. It was useful to know what Azazel had up his sleeve. Nice to meet you, White Dragon Emperor Chan, she managed to joke with a wave of her wand and a goofy smile. Vali simply ignored her. I will use Divide on him to counteract his boosts. You can use that opportunity to get him, make sure he doesn't die. I would like to fight my rival. Alright, you battle maniac, sounds like a plan, Azazel interjected, having enough of Vali's battle mania. They all nodded their agreement with the plan. Serafall and Gabriel were standing side by side as they held the barrier up. What you did to him was wrong, Serafall began. I know it was, more than you can imagine, Gabriel whispered quietly and with shame. He is a good person, how could you let it happen? Angels are supposed to be benevolent, but maybe you are just as crooked as us devils, Serafall jabbed, clearly unenthused by the angel's effort. Gabriel sent a glare to the Satan, she did not appreciate the accusations. You speak as if you knew Issei as long as I did, but you don't. I stood by him from the beginning, I saw him grow into the man he is, I saw him smile, I saw him fight his hardest so he could get stronger for the woman he loved. I saw him break, I saw him racked by guilt, and I know the wrongs he committed. I made a mistake, we all do, and I will atone for my mistake. Gabriel retorted, her tone steadily rising as tools pooled in the corner of her eyes. Everyone had been listening in on their argument. Michael had a frown on his lips. He knew he had caused Gabriel the pain and she loved Issei, but she never could admit it to him, and now they may have to kill him. Serafall, calm down, Serziches warned her, although he was surprised at how much Serafall liked Issei, so much so that she was practically picking a fight with Gabriel. Focus, Gabriel. You can argue later, but right now we have to save Issei's life. Azazel barked, not having any of the argument, his words snapped Gabriel back to attention. An enraged roar drew them back to fight. Akabiel's light spears struck the enraged dragon, but practically bounced off his dragon scales and seemed to irritate him more than anything. Akabiel was panting heavily as he exerted himself, sending dozens of light spears and swords in attempt to kill the dragon, but failing. A roar drew his attention back to the dragon before he quickly dodged a blast of green energy. Narrowly managing to avoid it, it struck the barrier the leaders had set up and was subsequently absorbed. Akabiel summoned another storm of spears and swords before summoning his own two-handed swords. A flap of his wings propelled him forward before he willed the storm of swords and spears forward. The swords exploded around the dragon or bounced off his dragon scales. Akabiel came within striking distance, his two-handed sword poised to strike, and he struck the first blow, cutting a sharp slash across the chest plate, but it was shallow. He glanced up to see the crooked, disfigured grin teeth before an arm quickly swiped Akabiel away, cutting into his arms as he went tumbling away. He managed to upright himself as he clutched his bleeding arm, his breathing was more laborious. He dropped down to one knee as he clutched a light sword. He clenched and unclenched his hands, he could feel the adrenaline roaring through his veins, a laugh of joy escaped his lips before he began summoning more light spears. The dragon responded to this growing power with a grunt as his body shuffled to face the threat. A low growl escaped his mouth as if he was merely annoyed by the threat, perhaps angry. Then began the powering up boost. 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 An oppressive aura began expanding. The leaders responding by pushing more of their power into the barrier, preparing for the new onslaught. Volley was laughing in joy as a grin formed on his lips. This is what I expect from my rival. He practically cheered his rival on. Akabiel is so fucked, Azazel muttered. Bring it. Akabiel roared back as he began summoning more light spears, while his opponent began charging up with his own draconic power. The tension in the air was thick as both began summoning the full might of their power. Then the world seemed to freeze before they released their full might. A storm of light spears met a beam of draconic energy. The blinding white flash covered the arena, forcing the onlookers to shield their eyes. A few tense moments passed before it cleared. A cloud of dust lingered before it lessened, revealing the silhouette of an enraged dragon, but no Akabiel. A faint gurgling was held as everyone looked to see a Akabiel with his left arm and left leg gone, as half his body was atomized as he lay on the floor in a pool of his own organs and blood. His attempts at breathing escaped as gurgles as he practically choked on his own blood, his chest heaving as blood continued spilling from his body, as blood spluttered from his mouth as he tried to gulp for air, but it was an exercise in futility. Within moments the light faded from his eyes as a smile of pure satisfaction remained on his face. He had died gloriously on the field of battle, and he wanted nothing more. The howl of satisfaction escaped the berserk dragon's maw. He had finally had his vengeance. The leaders waited, breath held, hoping he would snap out of the throes of Juggernaut Drive. Issei, it's done. Gabriel called to him. This earned the dragon's attention. Gabriel stepped forward as all eyes turned to her. Issei, snap out of it please. Gabriel pleaded once the dragon paused as if it was contemplating the angel's words. She wouldn't want this, please Issei, you have suffered enough, Irina. Her pleading was cut off by an enraged roar, the mention of Irina, as the ground started shaking, while his wings flapped in anger. He's gone berserk, we have to restrain him, Serafall declared, worry plaguing her mind. Michael and Azazel, you maintain the barrier. Serafall, Gabriel, you two are with me, we have to restrain him, and Volley, you have to weaken his power. Serziches ordered, but as he did the dragon seemed to turn to them. Volley now. Azazel suddenly called. Vanishing dragon scale male. This seemed to draw the dragon's attention as his face turned to his rival. Volley flew towards his enemy before stopping within a few meters and hovering above him. Let's see your true strength, my rival, Volley muttered beneath his breath before he held his hands out. I, who am about to awaken. Wait, he is going to activate Juggernaut Drive as well? Serafall questioned with worry. Volley, unlike his rival, he has complete control during Juggernaut Drive. Azazel calmed them, but they were still nervous, but they decided to trust him. I'm the heavenly dragon who has taken the principles of supremacy from God. I envy the infinite and I pursue the dream. I shall become the white dragon of supremacy, and I shall take you to the limits of white paradise. Volley became a larger form of himself with his wings able to eclipse the moon. Show me your worth, my rival, isseihyoudou, Volley taunted his rival as he held his arms open, completely relaxed. An enraged roar escaped his rival as he began powering up. Boost. 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 boost, 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 boost. Well done, Volley. Your skills at taunting are more impressive than your combat prowess, Albion commented sarcastically. The ball of green energy formed before it was promptly fired at Volley. He raised his hand out before he called out, divide, 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 divide. The beam shrunk into nothingness as Volley grinned under his helmet. He felt raw power coursing through his veins. Don't mind if I steal more of your power, my dear rival. Volley taunted before he began stealing his opponent's power. Divide, 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 divide. Volley glowed with blue energy, exuding raw power before he summoned his own 2 balls of blue draconic energy. He promptly threw them at his rival before Serafall added her own might, freezing the dragon's legs, while Serziches threw a sword of ruin magic, while Gabriel threw 3 light spears. Their attacks enraged the dragon and did damage him, although it was promptly negated by the dragon powering up some more. Little did the fighters know that Drake was waging an internal war to save his partner's soul, and one word gave him a chink in the chains of rage that held Issei's soul. Issei stood over the body of his enemy Tokyoghoul. His futile gulps of air echoing through his mind. Issei's heart slowed as he glanced down at his hands dipped in the blood of the person who murdered his girlfriend. You think you won? The voice of his most hated enemy echoed. He glanced down to see a mocking grin on the half-dead Tokyoghoul. You're dead, Issei spat. A chilling laugh echoed as Tokyoghoul's only eye glanced up at him, taunting him. So is she. Tokyoghoul still managed to lick his lips. Her screams were the most beautiful thing. She screamed for you to save her, but where were you? Where were you as the woman you loved screamed for mercy, screamed for you to help her, save her? Her crying face was so beautiful I couldn't stop gutting her. I was surprised there was anything left of her. Issei clutched his head in pain as he stepped back, Tokyoghoul's laughs and words ringing in his ears. The pain in the head got worse. He couldn't handle it. He fell to his knees screaming as flashes of Arena's lifeless body assaulted him, her organs barely staying in her body, blood everywhere, tears staining her cheeks. Her beautiful auburn hair practically colored blood red. He could remember that moment exactly. He fell to his knees clutching her body, shaking it while screaming her name. Zenobia, a broken mess bawling in a corner. None of his words could rouse her. His hands dipped in her blood as fruitlessly tried to revive her, him crying as he clutched her body. Then came memories of the worst part. They stared into each other's eyes, dark amber against brown before they both met in the middle, their lips mashing greedily, chasing some form of comfort. Issei's hands roving over her body, prying off any article of clothing that got in his way, while she the same for him. Their lips never parting as they roughly fell on top of each onto the bed, both of them seeking warmth as their tongues tangled greedily and with need. Issei's harrowing screams continued as Tokyoghoul continued laughing. Enough. Drake roared as he unleashed a long breath of fire, burning away his fears, pain and guilt. Issei stood up, his eyes wide as he witnessed his partner Drake. The dragon cracked a toothed grin. Nice to see you again, partner, Drake greeted before he found Issei hugging his chest or attempting to do so. He was a 15-foot dragon after all. Drake allowed it for a few moments before his pride could no longer handle it. Oi oi, I'm a dragon, not a cuddly teddy bear. Issei had a wide smile on his face. It had been a long time since Drake had seen him smile as he did. While Drake's power was sealed off, he could still see what his partner was experiencing, and he always accepted his partner's decision to seal him. But when Tokyoghoul stabbed him, it had given Drake the needed impetus to break the seal. But unfortunately Drake had used Issei's rage to fuel his power, but it had subsequently taken him over. Been a while since I have been in here, Issei joked as he did a 360, while Drake couldn't help but chuckle. Issei was about to open his mouth to speak, but Drake interrupted him. We can talk later, partner, but right now you are going berserk. Juggernaut drive, he muttered. I have managed to at least gain back some of your conscience, but not all of it. Albion and his host, Serafall, Serziches and Gabriel, are trying to restrain you, but it's proving troublesome, Drake informed him before Issei clenched his fist. Where is Zenobia? The devils took her away to heal her, but besides that I am not sure, Drake informed his partner. So how are we going to take my body? Issei asked, turning to Dragon, whose eyes glanced away before looking back to his partner. I know that look, you have an idea, but it may not be good. Issei caught on to the dragon's trepidation. Since I have gained some of your conscience back, you and I could forcefully expel the spirits controlling you, but it's going to hurt like a bitch. Painful was the term I would use, but that is a good way of putting it, Drake admitted. Well, what are we waiting for? I want my damn body back. Issei on the outside was a monster. He was taking blow after blow. He was slowing down, but he was still putting up a monster's fight. Sasukeuchiha was holding back with his power of destruction, reluctant to use more, as ultimately would rather not kill the Red Dragon Emperor, as he was a possible solution to his troubles with House Phoenix. Also, it would not do well politically with Azazel and Michael, especially Gabriel. He glanced to his allies, not sure how much longer they could afford to try and weaken him, but they were too wrapped up in their own thoughts to entertain him with any response. Gabriel and Serafall minds were in a frantic state, thinking of the worst-case scenario, as the enraged dragon did not let up. In the heat of battle, they surprisingly worked together effectively. Where Serafall threw ice, Gabriel threw her weight behind the attack, targeting the same point. Meanwhile, Volley was not disappointed. The battle had his heart pumping and adrenaline flowing, but he wished to fight his opponent when he wasn't in a berserk state. The dragon suddenly paused before unleashing a scream of complete utter pain and agony, and his wings began thrashing as he began stomping on the ground. Something is happening, Volley. Get back. Albion warned his partner, who in turn warned Serafall, Sasukeuchiha and Gabriel. Get back. The leaders heeded his call and backed off, trepidation on everyone present before suddenly the dragon began shrinking. Azazel? Michael asked, hoping for an answer as he turned to his fallen counterpart. I have no damn clue, Azazel admitted as he watched on with interest. The dragon continued shrinking. The disfigured limbs started turning into his previous form and scale male. The screams started becoming more human, the distorted draconic voice gone. The screaming was Issei's voice. Issei. Gabriel and Serafall shouted in concern as everyone watched with trepidation and pity. Some flinched at the extent of the screaming. The draconic scales of his balance breaker disintegrated to show Issei clutching his left hand, which was pulsing scales and a flashing emerald stone, as it thrashed in his grip. While his veins appeared as red or green lines pulsing with energy, and his left eye flashing green as he fell to his knees screaming in absolute pain. He's gaining control of his body. Azazel declared as the oppressive aura of Juggernaut Drive began receding. Ayahahahaha. Issei continued screaming as he continued fighting back for control of his body. Gabriel began walking closer, her heart no longer able to take watching him suffer. She wanted to hold him, comfort him. Gabriel, get back. Issei roared, demonstrating he had semblance of control as he saw the blonde-haired angel advance closer, glancing between his thrashing left arm and her. I am still not in control, Gabriel. He roared, but she didn't care. She continued walking, her arms outstretched as tears pooled in the corner of her eye, her heart beating in her chest with pity for the man she loved. I don't care. She declared before she hugged him. He thrashed against her, but she didn't care. It's fine, Issei, everything is alright, she whispered as she held his head to her chest. His screams deafening. Gabriel. He roared, but she ignored him, holding him even tighter, and little by little his thrashing and screaming weakened before stopping. Gabriel glanced down to see brown eyes of the man she loved stare back at her. Gabriel, thank you, he managed to utter before he suddenly had a violent coughing fit, blood staining the angel's white robes. While she glanced down to see that his chest wound had begun bleeding again, his eyes flickered while he became weaker in her arms. Her eyes widened in horror. Issei. Issei. She began shouting his name as she shook him. He seemed to become paler while he coughed more and more of his blood, and he bled out on the ground and the angel clutching him. Michael. She screamed for her brother as Issei continued coughing, seeming not to stop, her brother running over, as did the other leaders. However, none were faster than Serafall. Issei, stay with me, it will be fine, I promise, please Issei, I love you, Gabriel pleaded as she lightly shook Issei, who was on the edge of consciousness, but it was no vain as he passed out in her arms, his life in the balance. Gabriel began sobbing, but as she began applying medical care, clutching his wound with both hands as they glowed yellow, channeling healing magic, but the fear was clear to see as her hands shook uncontrollably as she continued healing. Serafall reached first to add her own powers to the healing. The two exchanged looks before they continued healing him, his body limp beneath them as he was no longer conscious. As Serafall tried to save her friend's life, a feeling surfaced in her gut, a feeling she didn't expect, one of fear that her friend would die, but another feeling lingered in the Satan's mind. Jealousy, absolute jealousy as she saw the angel hug her friend. She couldn't explain why she had this feeling, but it was of no concern as what was her priority was to save her friend's life, but such feelings don't go away, they merely gnaw at the back of your mind. Chapter 8. Thrust back in. The pair of gentle green eyes scanned over the unconscious form of isseihyoudou. His chest rising and falling slowly, his boosted gear manifested on his left arm as some of his veins extending from the gear pulsed red. He was resting in a large bed within a large marble room made of white and gold. The silk sheets that covered isseihyoudou a pure white. She leaned forward to brush a strand of his hair back, a genuine smile forming on her lips. He seemed so peaceful, but he had been unconscious for the better part of a month. The moment when Issei began dying and her arms flickered through her eyes once again almost destroying her smile. If it weren't for Serafall and her healing magic, he would not have survived to reach heaven where they worked round the clock to keep him alive. The first week were the most stressful, she barely left his bedside and even Serafall would check up with her about Issei. The two set aside their differences for him despite their mutual distrust of each other, but even so, it would take time to fully get rid of the distrust. Her hand moved down to hold his own as she sat on a bedside chair. She sometimes fooled herself into thinking he squeezed back, but she still held hope he would wake up. Gabriel. Another voice entered. She turned to see Zenobia clad in her exorcist outfit with her Excalibur destruction strapped to her back ever since she was attacked by Kuoh. She never let the sword out of her sight. Zenobia. Gabriel nodded back. Zenobia walked closer to the bed, her eyes glued to his sleeping form. "How is he today?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual bluntness and harshness. It was soft. "Still no change since last week," Gabriel admitted sadly. The two held their breath as they saw the veins on his face glow green, while his breathing stopped before the green bled away and his breathing resumed. It happened from time to time, but it was simply spikes from leftover excess draconic power acclimatizing to his system or bleeding away. "You have recovered well," Gabriel spoke reluctantly, prying her eyes away from Issei to look at Zenobia. "I was lucky, if it weren't for those devils I would have died," she begrudgingly admitted, but her hatred of devils still undercut her voice. "I only wish I could have killed the bastard myself," Zenobia muttered, her fists clenched. "He is dead, Zenobia, there is no need to hold on to the hatred," Gabriel told Zenobia. She wanted Zenobia to get rid of her hatred, just as she hoped Issei would when he wakes up. But she knew it would take time for both of them, but in Zenobia's case, she could see it bleed away bit by bit. Issei would take longer, his scars run deeper, and his hatred stewed for longer. She knew for sure that every moment he was doing a monotonous task his mind would wander to her. That was just how Issei was. He always cared for his friends and loved ones, their failure would weigh upon him. Zenobia walked closer to him, her eyes glued to his face. She looked as if she wanted to do something, the doubt evident on her face, but fear of what she was thinking of doing. "I must go, Griselda wishes to see me," Zenobia said stiffly before leaving the room. Gabriel's eyes followed her for a few moments before returning to her vigil of the man she loves. Serafall stood at her desk, her eyes hardened as she once again read the file on isseihyoudou given to her by Michael per her request. A sign of good faith and cooperation for the future. Serafall was no fool, and neither was Michael. This was diplomacy. The church recognized they are in weaker position. It was near impossible Issei would join the church again. So the church had to try and curry favor with both sides, hence why she was given the file, and Michael was helping Azazel hunt down Kuoh's followers and the Excaliburs. Her eyes slowly drinking in every line, every word as her mind played a mental image of his story. She read the file to the last page before shutting the file and setting it on her table. Michael was crafty for an angel. He knew how to get Issei to join their side, but she could not understand what possessed him to send two exorcists after Kuoh during his theft of an Excalibur. Presumably they may have been the closest response team, but was it worth risking two skilled exorcists to attempt to stall for reinforcements? In her opinion, no. Excalibur users were rare. Just because he stole the blade, it would not mean he necessarily had someone to wield it. She had been mulling over the problem, but she only could come down to the conclusion the angel had made a foolhardy naive mistake that cost him the loyalty of Issei and the death of an Excalibur user. Another thing plaguing her mind was a conversation she had with Serziches 2 weeks after Issei's battle with Kuoh. "You want to use him?" Serafall almost snarled as she looked at her longtime friend. "I don't see some any other way to get Riaz out of her marriage," Serziches sighed. "But having the Red Dragon Emperor duel the Phoenix? What's in it for them?" Serafall countered. "Razor's pride, if he gets goaded he will take the bait." "I don't want him to be used," Serziches Serafall declared. "Damn it, Serafall, I am out of options." "I will be damned if I let Razor marry Riaz," Serziches retorted back. "You have another option and you know it," Serafall countered back. "I can break the marriage myself, but the political fallout." Serziches sighed as he continued pondering the situation. "No, that's not an option. I can't show favoritism, the council will be up in arms." Serafall begrudgingly relented. She cared for Issei, but she understood Serziches' plight. "You can ask him if he wants to help, but you know this will thrust him right back in if he accepts it." "I don't support this." "Serafall, he is already neck deep. It's now up to him to make the most of it," Serziches pointed out before he left Serafall. Back to current time, Serafall was pondering another dilemma involving her brunette bartender. Why did her heart race every time she thought of him? Why did she see that the fact Gabriel was taking care of him and not her? She had an answer, but whether anything would come of it was another story. Rainer walked down the halls of the Grigori having been requested by Azazel in his office. She reached the door before knocking gently, but Azazel could hear it with ease. In Azazel's voice called back, "You wanted to see me, Lord Azazel." Rainer greeted Azazel with a small bow as she entered the office of the head of the Grigori. Rainer, "Yes I did," he greeted back with his usual smile as he looked up from his seat. "How are you holding up?" He suddenly asked. This made Rainer cock her eyebrow in suspicion. "I am sorry, I don't understand what you mean," she asked, attempting to act clueless. Rainer Azazel deadpanned before he continued. "Isseihyoudou, your bartender, the Red Dragon Emperor, and that was the elephant in the room." "I am doing fine." No she wasn't. Issei plagued her mind. She couldn't believe it, her bartender, her friend, her confidant, her love interest was the Red Dragon Emperor with a lot of baggage. "Rainer, he has been unconscious for a month and I still remember how you talked about him when we had our conversation. I also saw how you were reluctant to leave him when he went berserk." Azazel continued. His tone was soft and honest. "So I will ask again, how are you doing?" He pressed. "I can't stop thinking about it. I couldn't believe that he was the Red Dragon Emperor. I sat across from him, talked with him, asked him for advice, but I just didn't know. He had us all fooled," Azazel calmly pointed out. "I knew he had something haunting him. I just couldn't imagine that it was a dead girlfriend killed by Kuoh, a fallen angel." Her glued to the floor as she spewed her thoughts while she squeezed her hands together in nervousness. Azazel calmly listened before inputting his thoughts. "You like him?" Rainer's heart jumped while her face jerked up to face her leader. She fought hard to resist blushing, but some of it seeped through. Azazel chuckled, but it wasn't cruel or meant to insult her, it seemed genuine. He stood up before going behind to lean on his chair as he continued facing Rainer. "If you think he is going to hate you just because you are a fallen angel, I think you are sorely mistaken. It also helps from what I have heard Gabriel say about him. The kid isn't the type to judge or usually hold grudges." Rainer brightened up at this and continued listening. "But he won't exactly be warm." The kid wanted out, but now he is neck deep back in the supernatural. He will feel backed in a corner and people tend to react badly, but you can also be his friend, his support, his comfort. He will need a friend, he will need you. Rainer listened intently to Azazel's advice. "This has helped clear up my thoughts." "Thank you, Azazel." Rainer thanked him while Azazel nodded. "As soon as I know any changes to his condition I will tell you," Azazel informed her. Rainer softened at that and a small smile graced her lips as she stood up, but before she left, she glanced over her shoulder. "Thank you, Azazel." He nodded a final goodbye just before she stepped through the door before sitting back in his chair. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. He didn't want to tell Rainer she had competition in the form of Gabriel and Serafall. He was less sure if Serafall was interested, but he didn't rule it out. He didn't want to dissuade Rainer, but whether she would get his attention while competing with Gabriel and Serafall would be intriguing. "That kid is gonna have a lot of problems on his hands," he muttered as he then moved to ponder about the conference and how isseihyoudou factored into the situation. Afternoon descended as isseihyoudou continued slumbering away. Gabriel had gone quickly to get some food. Meanwhile, a gauntleted finger twitched as the emerald gem of the boosted gear began humming gently and softly. Another finger twitched as his facial muscles tensed and relaxed while his eyelids scrunched. His breathing halted for a few moments before his eyes burst open and he immediately launched into a half-sitting position as he desperately exhaled his re-aiming breath before his cheek began heaving as he greedily sucked in fresh air. A sweat began forming on his face as he clasped his face with his gauntlet-clad hand. He felt his body shaking and bile pooling in his throat. Drake, he called for his partner desperately as he felt his head begin spinning. "Issei, I am here." "Calm down, it's just excess power. Your body is bleeding away what little there is left." Drake quickly intervened to calm his partner. "Ah." He groaned as he felt his headache worsen. He held his head in his gauntlet hand, but then he began hearing words drum into his skull. "Issei, stay with me, it will be fine, I promise, please Issei, I love you." The voice all too familiar, his headache intensified. "I love you." The phrase echoed. "I love you." The phrase echoed again. Issei's eyes widened in abject horror as his heart began speaking and he began hyperventilating. "Issei, calm down. Damn it, calm down." Drake shouted, trying to calm his panicking partner. "I can't, Drake, she can't love me, I can't love Gabriel back. Damn it, I am not ready for this. Damn it, Gabriel, damn it." He began panicking as images of him and Gabriel dating assaulted him, but then one struck him, Gabriel dead in her own pool of blood, and he was unable to save her. The supernatural would cause her death, or more accurately his power would, people would fight him, and Gabriel would die as she would be a means to him, a weakness. Just like Kuoh and Arena. He wouldn't have any of it. "No, damn it, I want out of this shit," he growled. Issei threw off the covers before leaping out of the bed, clad only his underwear as a massive scar from where Kuoh speared him was carved into his chest. Drake's words to his partner had fallen on deaf ears as Issei was oblivious to the dragon's calls to heed him. He ran out of the room and his heart jumped into throat as he came face to face with her. She dropped her tray as tears flowed from her eyes. Issei stepped back. "Issei?" she asked as if he was ghost. His heart raced faster while he clenched and unclenched his fists. His mouth dried up and his jaw clenched shut. "Issei, you shouldn't be standing," her voice soft and oozing with concern as she stepped towards him, her emerald green eyes practically searing into him. Issei clenched his fist as his head thrummed with pain, their eyes locked for just a moment, but Issei pulled away and glanced behind him to see a balcony. She stepped closer, but she wouldn't get any closer as isseihyoudou ran towards the balcony as Gabriel called out to him. He put one foot in front of the other before he threw doubt out of his mind and leaped from the seventh heaven. Heaven was greeted with the sight of a pair of crimson dragon wings as isseihyoudou descended from heaven to earth. The whole supernatural would know the Red Dragon Emperor has returned. Chapter 9. The Race for the Red Dragon Emperor. Gabriel leaned over the balcony hoping to see Issei, but he was gone, tears welled up in the corner of her eyes. The face of a horrified and scared Issei was burned into her mind and it was tearing her up. Why was he scared? Why did he run from her? Was it her fault? Yes, it was all the fear and doubt was directed at her, but once again why was he scared and why did it force him to run? He had been unconscious for over a month, so what must have scared him occurred before he fell into unconsciousness. Then it dawned on her face paled as she fell back against a wall feeling weak in her legs, her hand over her mouth. He heard her, didn't he? He heard the words that she couldn't admit to him till he was bleeding out in her arms. "I love you." She just told the man who is still grieving his dead loved one and one who blamed himself for her death that she loved him. It wasn't ideal, to say the least, then she began questioning herself. Was he scared because he couldn't reciprocate her feelings? The mere thought of it tore her heart. Or could it be because he feared what happened to Irina would happen to her? Tears had streamed down her cheeks just as Michael her brother arrived, worry written all over his face. "Gabriel? Are you alright? Did he do anything to you?" He quickly bombarded her, a glint of rare anger in the angel's eyes. Her sadness, doubt and fear quickly ignited into anger as she stared up to meet her brother's eyes. "No he didn't and you know he would never do anything to me. And Michael the first don't want you to belittle him, I want you to help me find him." She retorted sharply. Michael recoiled, rarely seeing his sister snap or even be angry. His eyes were embroiled in confusion and concern, but he decided to heed his sister's words. "I will go after him, you can inform Serafall, Serziches and Azazel, they would be willing to help us." Her brother replied slowly before spreading his wings and leaving. Gabriel quickly summoned a magic circle to contact Serafall, Serziches and Azazel for their help and sent a hasty message so that she could contribute to the search for Issei. Serafall felt a familiar burst of power and her eyes sharpened. Why could she feel Issei's power all of a sudden? Did he wake up and Gabriel didn't tell her, or did something happen? The question raced through her mind. Something else drew her attention. Her eyes flickered to a message magic circle that lit up her desk. She reached out and activated it. It was her rival's voice. "Gabriel." "Serafall." Issei woke up, but he's gone. He freaked out and ran. "We don't know where he is. Please, Serafall, we could use your help finding him. I need your help." Her voice was hasty, pleading and so genuine it delayed the Satan's anger long enough for her to respond. "I will help you find him, but after that, Gabriel, we need to talk." She quickly responded and sent her own magic message. Serafall growled the moment she sent the message. They had one job, to protect Issei, and now he's gone with every goddamn person in the supernatural hunting for the power of the Red Dragon Emperor. In a rare moment, the Satan lost her composure and slammed her fist down on her desk, cracking the desk in half. She couldn't take it, he had suffered enough, and if someone else was going to abuse him and make him suffer more, she wouldn't have it. She was currently seething with rage, her eyes narrowing with a deadly edge, rarely seen on the usually bubbly and laid-back Satan. She quickly stood up before summoning a teleportation circle, not bothering to inform Serziches as he would probably be informed, and it was a race against him. He would probably wish to get his hands on Issei to get him to bail him out of Ria's marriage debacle. She quickly teleported away to her house where she needed to pick up her servant. She arrived in her large bedroom filled with magic girl merchandise, and the color scheme was tones of purple, along with a purple bed. She quickly left her room to exit into a hall, before turning down to go to the end of it, where she slammed open the doors to be greeted by a room with a gym to the left side of the room, with a bed and kitchen to the right. The gym had weights that easily dwarfed Serafall's size. The machinery was all of the highest quality. All in all, a gym goer's wet dream. The room was entirely comprised of gray and black colors. Lady Serafall, a deep monotone voice greeted her. She turned to see the owner of the voice, her only servant, Behemoth. Behemoth took the form of a large 8-foot-tall man with tanned skin. He had a messy mop of black hair, which hid his wide eyes that could be seen edging out from time to time. He only wore jeans and a belt, not bothering with shoes or a shirt. It exposed his muscular form, not that of a full-on heavyweight bodybuilder, but more of a lean version of it. Basically, he is not stupidly muscular like the majority of bodybuilders, more of a swimmer's body, but with extra muscles, you can see. He had perfectly formed six-pack, well every time he moved you could see the slight tense and bulge of his muscles. His fists tending to remain in a permanent clenched state. He was currently bowing slightly with his clenched fist on his chest. "Behemoth, I need you, we are going to be searching for someone," she informed her servant, not in the mood to be calling him Behemoth-chan. The servant merely nodded as he stood straight. "By your will," he replied before Serafall turned around leaving the room while Behemoth followed her with purposed gait. She would find Isseihyoudou before anyone else. Azazel was sitting at his desk doing paperwork as he felt a surge of power from the Red Dragon Emperor. He dropped his pen as he glanced up at the ceiling before growling, "Son of a bitch. This is gonna get messy really quick." He could imagine the multitude of supernatural elements scrambling to get their hands on him. His desk lit up as he received a communication from Gabriel. "Azazel, Issei has woken up, but he ran away, we don't know why. Michael and I are going to be searching for him, we could use your help. Please, Azazel, lend us a hand." Gabriel's message spoke. "You got it, we will start looking for him." He replied quickly. Having received Gabriel's plea for help, he quickly stood up from his desk as an unexpected person burst through the door, Rainer. Worry and concern practically etched into her expressions as she spoke with haste and fear. "Lord Azazel, was that what I think it was?" The governor nodded. "He woke up but he ran, they don't know why, but we are gonna help them find him," he promised Rainer. "I want to help you find him," she declared fiercely and determination. Azazel ran his hand through his hair as a small smirk came to his lips. "Something tells me you would look for him even if I said no." He chuckled as Rainer blushed. "Please go find Shemhazai and Barakiel. Shemahazi will be in charge while I search, and Barakiel will help us," he ordered Rainer, who quickly nodded and left to find the errand. Just as she left, Volley appeared. "You felt that, didn't you?" Azazel asked the White Dragon Emperor, who merely nodded. "Yes, my rival practically screamed his revival." "Damn right he did, he started the mother of all shit storms with him at the center," Azazel commented. "We better find him quickly," then Volley quipped. We better, the Lord Governor concurred. Kyoto, Isaka, leader of the Yokai in Kyoto, quickly rushed into the inner temple of her headquarters, where her mistress lay. Yusaka was a young woman with a voluptuous figure with blonde hair and matching eyes, dressed in a shrine maiden attire. She entered a large decadent room with a stone path leading straight to a large marble throne, situated on a huge platform with space for tables and chairs. The path ran atop an indoor pond in which fish frolicked. The room had a high ceiling, adding more to the size and decadence of the room. The room was brightly lit except for the throne on which her mistress lay, adding to her mystique. Isaka quickly walked across the stone path before reaching her mistress, kneeling before her. The sharp whip of a harissa was heard as her mistress used it to slowly fan herself. "Mistress, it appears the Red Dragon Emperor has surfaced," Yusaka informed her mistress. A calm smile graced a pair of pink lips as Yusaka's mistress leaned forward, revealing herself. Her mistress, Tamamo no Mei, the first of Kitsune kind and the de facto leader of Yokai who preferred to control things from behind the scene. She was a beautiful woman dressed in a purple and white kimono. She had long flowing blonde hair that contrasted with her large 9 fluffy white tipped tails, while situated on the top of her head were a pair of fox ears. Her eyes a bright green, emerald green, filled with cunning and wisdom of a veteran leader and politician. Her harissa was set aside as she reached to a table near her throne. On it was a chessboard. She picked up a piece, a red dragon breathing fire. She gently ran her index finger over the piece as she appraised meticulously before a small laugh escaped her lips. She stood up, stepping down from her throne, the piece still in her fingers. Yusaka did not even raise her head as her mistress approached. "It seems the Red Dragon Emperor has rejoined the playing field. How interesting." Her voice oozing intrigue and calmness before she set down the piece as she picked up another, a white dragon raising his wings victoriously. But the White Dragon Emperor already allying with the fallen angels, the value of the Red Dragon Emperor has increased exponentially. Whichever faction secures him will benefit immensely, she mused openly before setting down the piece as she flicked open her harissa to slowly fan herself. Isseihyoudou, will you refuse the inevitable or embrace the reality and your fate? She pondered before laughing as a smile of interest graced her lips. She then made for the exit with Yusaka following behind her. The Red Dragon Emperor drew the attention of another powerful faction and powerful being. Olympus. Atop the mountain of Olympus, sitting on a throne, was by far one of mythology's most well-known beings, Zeus, king of the Greek gods. Zeus was a man dressed in an off-white toga with a white crown situated on his head. He had white hair with flecks of gold in it, while his eyes were an electric blue. He had a stubble giving him a more mature look. He had felt it, the raw power of the Red Dragon Emperor, and he wanted it. The power of the Greek had waned with time, not by much, but even a slight decrease in power would affect them a lot in terms of supernatural politics, and their relevances dwindled. Zeus sought to reassert the power of the Greek pantheon, and this was a way to do so. Artemis. He bellowed for his daughter and goddess of the hunt. The goddess of the hunt appeared dressed in brown hunting tunic with a large white hunting bow with a combat skirt. The goddess of the hunt had beautiful auburn hair with predatory amber eyes fit for a goddess of the hunt. She kneeled with her fist over her chest, her head bowed down. "You summoned O Zeus, king of the gods," she spoke formally. "Rise, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, I have a mission for you." Zeus spoke haughtily as Artemis rose. "The red dragon emperor has appeared, I wish for you to track him and invite him to our faction." Zeus informed Artemis although she already sensed the draconic power. "If he refuses?" she questioned. "Make sure he doesn't, he will be a great boon to us, do not fail." Zeus declared, in other words, drag him here if you have to. "It will be done, King Zeus." She bowed slightly before leaving Olympus and summoning her hunt. The hunt for the red dragon emperor has drawn the attention of Olympus. Isseihyoudou kneeled onto the ground as he finally reached solid ground having jumped from heaven. His hands still gripping his face as his breaths came out in ragged short bursts. Finally, Drake managed to be heard. "Issei." The dragon roared. Issei breath slowly began calming down, ragged short bursts turned into long, deep calming breaths. Issei bit his lower lip before he spoke. "Why?" Drake stayed silent for a few moments before speaking. "Why she loves you? Only she can answer that, but whether you return it is up to you, but now that you just basically announced to the whole damn world that the Red Dragon Emperor is back. We are neck deep in the shit you wanted to leave behind. I became neck deep the moment Kakebiel attacked me," Issei growled in frustration. "Issei, maybe you should join the angels again," Drake cautiously advised. Issei clenched his fists as his face hardened. "No, Michael used me, he isn't going to get my loyalty back that easily, and Gabriel. She doesn't deserve to be in harm's way. She will always be in harm's way whether she is actually dating you or not. She is a seraph of heavens. I know you are scared of loving someone again, scared of being thrust back into the supernatural, and you are scared of the burden my power gives you. This is why I will always have your back, but right now you are not thinking clearly. You need to calm down and collect your thoughts while we hide if you don't wish to be discovered." Issei took another deep breath as he digested Drake's words, and he could only come to one conclusion: his partner was right, he did need to hide, and he did need to collect his thoughts. "You are right, Drake, where are we right now?" Issei asked his dragon comrade as he glanced around seeing miles of damp forestry. "England, I would never forget this region." Issei throat dried, he knew two people who could help him, but whether he wanted to was a different story, but what little choice did he have? "I know somewhere we can hide." Isseihyoudou arrived at a large cabin in a clearing in the forest. The cabin was made of beautiful dark-colored wood and was 2 stories tall and had its own garage. He froze as he questioned whether he really wanted to do this, but Drake chimed in. "We do not really have a choice, and you are overthinking it," the dragon assured him, and with those words he advanced to the door, climbing the steps of the porch to knock on the door. His heart raced as it began beating louder, filling his ears with the sound of blood pumping and the contract of muscles. The sharp click of the door unlocking occurred as Isseihyoudou held his breath and it swung open. He stepped back, regret filling him and doubt surging back like a tide. "Issei?" A manly voice greeted him as a middle-aged man with light brown hair, the same as the love of his life. He was clad in standard priest's clothing. "Mr. Shidu, it's been a while." Chapter 10, Things Better Left Buried. As Issei was allowed into the house, it was exactly as he remembered. The living room was spacious with a fireplace, several chairs and couches. Next to the living room was a kitchen with a bar and several stools to sit on, and next to that was a small dining table big enough for 4 people. The aesthetic was a rustic and outdoor themed with wooden furniture being emphasized. Then it smelled the same as when he visited when Irina was alive, the gentle smell of lavender, which also Irina's favorite flower and smell. His breath caught in his throat, he was greeted by a person he wished he wouldn't have to see for as long as he lived. Irina's mother, Hikari Shidu. She was a spitting image of her daughter, her eyes narrowed before she stood up, visibly disgusted, and snarled. "She died because you were too weak to protect her. You promised to protect her and you failed." Hikari's words echoed in his mind, making flinch. "Aoji, what is he doing here?" She spoke with venom as she stared daggers at Issei. Mr. Shidu gave him an apologetic look before he spoke. "He came to check on us." Aoji lied, he knew that Issei probably needed a place to lay low. "Well, we are fine. We don't need him here." Hikari retorted as she pointed accusingly at him. "He will be here for a few hours before leaving." Taoji countered as he locked eyes with his wife. She huffed before storming off to her room, not wanting to see him. He then turned to face Issei and had an apologetic look on his face. "I'm sorry, she's still." "It's fine," Issei replied quickly, full well knowing the opinion of Mrs. Shidu about him. Mr. Shidu looked at him once again. Noticing the boy was shirtless and it wasn't exactly warm outside. "Would you like a shirt?" "Yes please," Issei spoke quietly. "Take a seat while I grab you one." Issei nodded mutely and took a seat as memories of the moments that changed his life flooded back. It was a beautiful afternoon and Isseihyoudou was walking home with his childhood friend, Irina Shidu. She was skipping happily ahead of him, her beautiful auburn hair dancing in the wind. Her happiness was infectious, and a small smile was etched on his lips. She stopped and turned around, his breath hitched in his throat. Her eyes an enticing, warm and innocent violet. "Ice, we are near the playground we used to hang out when we're kids, let's stop by." She spontaneously informed him, but he liked that about her, and she would be completely different without her spontaneity. "Sure, let's go," he replied, and Irina's smile widened as she skipped quickly away and he had to jog slightly to catch up with her. "Hey, wait up, Irina," he called after her. The two quickly arrived at their childhood playground, standing side by side, a nostalgic smile bloomed on their faces. It had not changed, the monkey bars, seesaw, slides, and the best part was the swings. Irina beat him to the punch and sat down on the swing before swinging her legs a little to allow her to start swinging a little. Issei walked over and sat down, struggling a bit to fit on the swing, but he managed to do so. Irina giggled as she watched her childhood friend struggle to fit in the seat due to his bigger frame. "Hey, I'm big alright," he complained playfully. I know. "Hey Ice?" she asked. "Yeah?" he replied, turning to face her, wondering what she was going to ask. "Do you remember when we used to play here and you thought I was a boy?" She brought up a rather old and extremely embarrassing misunderstanding. Issei couldn't help but blush and sputter. I do, but it was an honest mistake." "Why, you were a bit tomboyish back then." "Idiot." "That may be true, but how could you make such a mistake?" Irina retorted, blushing. "I was a bit dumb when I was young. I won't make that mistake again, I promise," he replied, blushing even harder. "Because I like you," he mentally answered as he glanced at the floor. "You better." Irina pouted cutely. Issei then began realizing this was the perfect moment, he could tell her that he loved her. Maybe, she might like him back. But what was the trade-off, risking their friendship? Things could turn into an awkward mess and they could slowly drift apart. Was he willing to risk it all for a chance? A chance that she might reciprocate his feelings. The chance was all he was gambling on, a 50-50 chance. "Ice?" Irina's voice cuts him out of his musing, her voice showed concern. His head shot up to face Irina and he could see her concern. He bit his lower lip before replying. "I am fine, just thinking about some things. If something is bothering you, Ice, you can talk to me about it, you know." She reminded him, the two were best friends, they shared loads of secrets, consulted each other with problems they faced and comforted each other. "Damn it." He mentally growled before he turned to face her, their eyes locking, and then the words came out. "I like you, Irina. I have liked you for a while. The way your joyful smile, your beautiful eyes and how you always cheer me up when I'm down. How you were still friends with me even when everyone else saw me as a good-for-nothing pervert. You mean so much to me and I want you to be my girlfriend." He practically shouted as his chest heaved with relief at finally shouting those words. His heart began racing and he clenched his fists in nervousness as he observed Irina. Both of them were blushing heavily. Irina looked shocked and she glanced up at the sky. Issei knew she was thinking, she always glanced up at the sky. She then turned to face him, she began pushing her index fingers together, she was nervous. "Do you really like me, Ice?" she asked meekly. Issei's eyes widened slightly as hope bloomed in him. Was she seeking confirmation? "I do, I really do." He nodded earnestly, reiterating his feelings. Irina's expression merged into joy as she suddenly began crying. Issei stood up and walked over to her in concern. "Irina," he spoke her name with concern. She suddenly hugged him and screamed her response. "I like you too, Issei. I have for a while as well." Relief flooded through Issei, she liked him back. He managed to hug her back, his arms wrapping around her lower back and holding her close and delicately like she was a precious diamond. "I wish I knew earlier, so we wouldn't have danced around it for so long," Issei sighed with relief. "I was being pretty obvious about it, idiot," Irina informed him. She hoped that he would notice, but she underestimated how dense her childhood friend was. Issei blushed in embarrassment at not picking up her hints. "I was also scared, I didn't want to ruin our friendship," Issei admitted the reason why he didn't confess earlier. "We would have still been best friends, you know that, Ice. It's so childish to throw our friendship out the window over rejection." Irina reasoned with him. "Not that I don't want to try being boyfriend, girlfriend. If we like each other there is no reason to not be boyfriend and girlfriend," she quickly added on. "Alright Irina, will you be my girlfriend?" he asked her much more formally. "Of course, Issei." She answered him as she hugged him tighter. Smiles on their face as their young love bloomed. "Issei? Issei?" A calm voice shook him out of his reverie as he felt a hand clasp his shoulder. "Mr. Shido, sorry, I was just thinking about something." Issei quickly shook his head as he looked up to the face the man. "I can tell, you looked completely lost in thought," Taji affirmed before offering Issei a red t-shirt. "Thank you." Issei quickly thanked him as he threw on the shirt. Taji then headed to the kitchen to make some tea. "So, you're back in, aren't you?" he spoke, addressing the obvious. Issei grimaced before nodding. "Yeah, I am." "How did it happen?" Taji calmly asked, his grey eyes locking with his. "I guess it really started when a magic girl walked into my bar," Issei contemplated as he leaned back in the chair. "Serafall Leviathan." Taoji calmly asked, to which Issei nodded before he laughed. You didn't know it was Serafall Leviathan until later, did you? To which Issei scratched his neck and sighed. Yeah, pretty dense of me. I guess I just really wanted to forget everything. I even met Surziches and Graifa, and I still didn't recognize them. I'm so stupid, Issei groaned at his blind stupidity. You just wanted to forget everything. It's understandable such a mistake would occur, plus we never told you how they look, just their names. Taoji pointed out. Then I met a girl, Rainer. She was different. I think she is a fallen angel, though she talked about being in love with a man called Azazel. Gave her advice on it, but when her friend mentioned him, I thought it was a coincidence, but I can't shake the feeling that she was referring to the Azazel. Issei thought aloud. Taoji just listened quietly. Then Kakabeel attacked me, Issei began explaining as Taoji listened and calmly waiting for the water to boil. Well, he attacked Zenovia, then me. They sent her on a suicide mission to retrieve the Excaliburs from him. Issei practically snarled as he continued explaining. Taoji frowned at his words. He found it shameful they would send Zenovia to find them. His attack allowed Drake to break out of his seal, and I fought him. Issei suddenly became mute. Taoji saw the young man start crying like a dam had finally broken. I killed him, I finally killed me, I avenged her, Taoji. He's dead, Issei began muttering, his tone more relief than joy, tears staining his cheek. Taoji seemed to freeze. The monster who killed his daughter was dead. Taoji could feel tears pool in the corners of his eyes before he quickly wiped them away with the sleeve of his clothes. He then walked over to Issei and placed a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. Issei cried harder. The man smiled. He understood how much Irina meant to him, and he didn't agree with how his wife treated him. He could understand why she did, but it didn't stop her from being any less wrong. The memories that brought isseihyoudou to this point surfaced violently. Issei's scale mail thudded against the metal floor of the church vaults as his deep breathing echoed within his helmet. Irina. Zenovia. Irina. Zenovia. He called out, trying to find them. He got closer to the main vault and he could hear faint crying. His heart began freezing with fear as he ran even faster. He burst into the room calling her name. Baron. The words died in his throat as did his breath at the scene before him. Zenovia was bawling in a corner, her hands clutching her head as her whole body shook from the force of her tears. It's my fault, it's my fault. She kept repeating over and over. Irina was laying lifelessly in a pool of her own blood, her exorcist uniform torn as she had several cuts, while a gaping wound on her abdomen kept spurting blood. One of her hands clutching her wound while another was clenched into a fist. His balance breaker deactivated as his hand reached out futilely. Irina. He spoke her name softly, disbelief evident as he stepped forward. His legs growing heavier with each step as his heart began speeding up. Drake was deathly quiet himself. Issei shook his head and then got a hold of himself. Backup was on the way, he could save her. He dashed over to her body. Irina, can you hear me? He asked her as he knelt beside her, ignoring that his knees and lower legs were soaked in her blood. He shook her gently. Irina. Irina. He asked again before putting his hand over her wound as he lay his head on her chest. No heartbeat. He quickly tore off the sleeves of his shirt as he placed it on her wound, lifting her hand to then press down on it to keep it in place. Zenovia. Zenovia. Get a hold of yourself. We can save her. Issei called out to Zenovia as he began doing CPR. Zenovia began sobbing harder. He then put his lips to her own. They were cool to the touch, but Issei was too caught up in the belief he could save her to notice. Drake the heavenly dragon couldn't form words. He couldn't have the heart to tell his partner. 1 2 3 4 he kept counting his compressions before placing his mouth to hers. The concept of time faded to Issei as he continued with no intention of stopping. Issei he heard Gabriel's voice. Gabriel. His voice carrying hope, but he didn't turn to face her. Gabriel, apply healing magic, you can save her. He quickly told her. Gabriel nervously stepped closer. Issei, there is nothing I can do, the words barely coming out of her mouth as she too was on the edge of tears. The sight broke her heart. Issei's hands were soaked in blood as he lay knelt in a pool of her own blood. Tear trails stained his cheeks. He had been crying without even realizing. No, Gabriel, we can do something. Issei retorted, still believing he could save her. Partner. I am sorry, Drake spoke up, finally mustering the courage to speak. Even then his voice was weak and sad, a sharp contrast to the normally vocal and confident dragon. No, Drake, there is always something we can do. Issei barked back. He then felt Gabriel's hand rest gently on his shoulder. Then it hit him, the reality crashed into him like a truck and he began crying once again as his lips quivered and his body shaking with disbelief and grief. No, Gabriel, please tell me this isn't happening. Gabriel, tell me this isn't happening. He clutched her robes, holding on for dear life as he glanced up to see her face. She glanced away, tears pooling in the corner of her eyes. She wished she could tell him it wasn't happening. Gabriel. Gabriel. He called her name as she was silent, her lips quivering as she tried to say something but couldn't. Issei, I am sorry, this is real. She is gone. I am sorry, Drake declared quietly and somberly. Issei's hands felt weak, his body heavy, his vision fading as he glanced at his blood-soaked hands before glancing at her body. Ah no. 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 This can't be happening, Irina, please, Irina. He shook her body hoping for something, anything, but he did it weakly. Whether he wanted to admit it or not really had begun to set in. Issei, please. Gabriel's hand gently grabbed his. He didn't fight. Instead, he hugged her, holding on to Gabriel for dear life. She hugged him back and gently began edging him away from Irina's body, humming gently, trying to remain strong for him. Michael walked past the two, but he could still feel Gabriel's glare on his back. He kneeled by Irina's body. The usually gentle archangel face was stone-faced and ashamed. He reached forward and shut her eyelids. Rest in peace, Irina Shidou. And I hope you can forgive me, he begged quietly. He then glanced at her hand, which was clenched tightly into a fist. He gently opened it and revealed a silver locket. He opened it to find a picture of her and Issei smiling joyfully and happily. More guilt and shame mounted on his shoulders before he shut the locket and placed it back in her cold hands before closing it into a fist once again. A tear trailed down the archangel's cheek. In her last moments, she was thinking of her loved one, a loved one who could not save her because of his mistaken arrogance. Quickly wiping away his tear and steeling himself, he stood up to see Issei and Zenobia holding on to Gabriel and Griselda respectively. More shame built, causing him to steel himself more. Take her body gently and inform Tauji Shidou to come see me, he ordered angels before walking out of the vault, his head tipped down in shame. It was the day of Irina's funeral. He and Zenvoya attended, but both were ashamed and scared to walk up to her coffin. Issei was dressed in black, while Zenobia wore her own black dress. Gabriel and Griselda had attended the funeral as moral support, while Michael attended as well as atonement, so he would remind himself to never ever recklessly cost people their lives. The funeral was extremely somber, and Irina's coffin was on a platform well surrounded by lavenders, her favorite flower. Many people were shocked at her death. A car accident, it was a white lie. Only the archangels, Griselda, Zenobia, Issei and her parents, as well as a handful of angels and exorcists, knew the truth. Tauji Shidou and Hikari Shidou were by her coffin, Hikari sobbing uncontrollably in hysterical disbelief. Tauji Shidou was grief-stricken as well, but he maintained a strong face for his wife and for himself. Issei was unable to look at them, and neither was Zenobia. Zenvoya hadn't told anyone, but it was her fault that Irina died. She was too reckless against Kakebiel, and fought aggressively. He deflected her strike, leaving her open only for Irina to take the blow for her. She had died because of her own hot-headedness, and she would live for that shame for the rest of her life. I want out, Zenobia, Issei told her quietly, the usual joyfulness gone. She glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Bags were under his eyes, and his eyes bloodshot. She was in a similar state. I won't stop you, Issei, but don't you want to kill that bastard? She asked. There is nothing more than I want than to wrap my hands around his throat and slowly choke the life out of him as I watch, Zenobia. But I can't. As long as I am a part of this, I will always be reminded of my failure every day, and I don't want to put any of you at risk. How could I? He then glanced at his left hand. What is the point of having this much power if I can't even protect the girl I loved? It hurts Zenobia so damn much. He spoke with shame and sadness. It does hurt, and I miss her so much. Zenobia concurred. She was not one for many words. Meanwhile, Gabriel and Griselda were having a conversation of their own. How is he? Griselda asked. He is still grieving, but he wants to leave the supernatural. It reminds him of her and the power he has. He hates it. He finds it pointless because he could not protect her, and he blames himself. Gabriel replied. It tore her heart to watch the two grieving so young. She had been nurturing feelings for Issei, but always kept feelings in check, but now she had a chance. It was selfish, but she could not stop her mind from wandering to such a possibility. Zenobia blames herself as well, Griselda admitted. We haven't found anything on Kakebiel or the Excaliburs either. Gabriel sighed in frustration. Michael may not necessarily allow Issei to leave. He also blames himself, but he is also thinking about the faction. Gabriel added. Her brother had been regretting the decision. He was ashamed and wished he never gave the order for Zenobia and Irina to delay Kakebiel to Issei, and reinforcements could arrive. Michael will put up a fight, but his heart won't be in it. He will let Issei go. You just have to keep pushing, Griselda deduced. I hope so. I really hope so. He deserves peace, Gabriel hoped. You? How dare you show your face here? A sharp voice cut through their conversation. Issei and Zenobia flinched at the voice. Hikari Shidou stormed up to both of them, but she was not interested in Zenobia, while Tauji Shidou followed behind her. She jammed her finger into his chest. It's all your fault. She screamed at him, her eyes mad with fury and despair as tears pooled in them. Issei looked on the verge of cracking just from the first words. She died because you were too weak to protect her. You promised to protect her and you failed. The words stabbed through Issei, and everyone watched on with disbelief. Issei's body shook and said the only words he could. I'm sorry. A resounding smack echoed through the room as Issei fell back onto his rear, his head hung in shame. Issei. Zenobia and Gabriel called out in shock. Hikari. Tauji shouted in disbelief at what his wife had just done. You killed my daughter. You took her away from me. Hikari screamed as Zenovia kneeled by Issei, her arms wrapped protectively around him as she stared at Hikari. You think he doesn't feel your pain? He loved her. He would swap places with her if he could. Zenovia retorted back. He doesn't deserve to be here, Hikari snarled. Hikari. Calm down. She wouldn't want this. Taoji retorted. Our daughter is dead, Taoji. Dead because of him. She shouted back at her husband. I'm sorry, I will leave. Issei suddenly stood up, a red slap print embedded on his face and it stung. He walked away, his head hung in shame, and Zenovia walked after him, concerned for her friend. Gabriel wished to chase after them, but she had to discuss Issei wanting to leave with Michael. Zenovia and Issei walked back to his apartment. The walk was silent and they were only accompanied by the gentle hum of the wind. They finally reached Issei's apartment and he sat on his bed, head still hung in shame and tear trails on his cheeks. Zenovia walked into the kitchen to grab some ice. Issei, please raise your head, Zenovia asked gently as she sat next to him. He complied before he flinched at the feeling of cold ice, suddenly pushed against his face. Zenovia, gently, he reminded her. Sorry, she apologized as she began putting the ice gently on his cheek and the reddening began going down. Issei, she didn't mean those words, Zenovia told him. I know she didn't, but it was still the truth. I was too weak to protect her, Issei admitted. They both sat in silence, pain mounting. At that moment the two did something unthinkable. They turned to face each other and both edged closer before their lips touched. It wasn't filled with honesty or love, just need and desire to get rid of the pain. They then wrapped their arms around each other before they mashed their lips together, seeking a brief relief from the pain. They soon felt the pleasure and relief of the flesh, but it was a temporary reprieve. They would reason it was to stop the pain, but both would forever carry the guilt. Issei's memories were suddenly cut off as he stood up, feeling a powerful being nearby. Issei, it's a goddess. Drake warned. Issei, is that? Taoji asked. Yes, it's a supernatural being, a goddess probably. Sorry for imposing on you, but I gotta go. Issei thanked him quickly as he headed for the exit, not wanting to put Taoji at risk. Taoji stood up to go after him. Let me help you, Taoji said as he went to get his exorcist sword. No, they only want me, and I already cost you Arena. I'll be damned if you die for my mistake. Issei growled. You fool, this is my decision, and I will help you, Taoji declared as he turned around to get his exorcist sword. He didn't make it far as he fell to the floor with a resounding thud. I am sorry, I can't let you, Issei declared, having manifested the boosted gear. He then dashed out of the house and into woods, drawing them away from the Shidou's house. He then reached a massive clearing before an arrow stopped him in his tracks. He turned around to face the goddess of the hunt, with her bow drawn along with several wolves and huntresses. She eyed the boosted gear on his left hand. Artemis, Drake warned. Red Dragon Emperor, I am Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Zeus, king of the gods, wishes to meet you. Artemis got straight to the point. And if I refuse? Issei retorted, already knowing she would not take no. Zeus will not accept refusal. I would prefer if you came willingly. The goddess admitted she really did not think it was a good idea to force people into things. But she could not disobey her father. The supernatural doesn't take no for an answer, does it? Issei sighed. I politely refuse and insist you go to hell, Issei growled as he bowed slightly. Impudent male, you dare insult the goddess of the hunt. One of the huntresses growled out as she launched an arrow. He reflexively raised his hand and blocked the arrow. Impudent. Says the hypocrites, you come to me assuming I would want to be involved with you, and if not you would force me in it anyway. The supernatural spent too long getting whatever they wanted. If you want to recruit me, Artemis, you will have to do it over my lifeless body, Issei retorted. Artemis found her patience wearing thin. She would not be belittled by a man. You are a human and just recently unlocked your secret gear. You cannot think to fight me and win. Think rationally, I do not wish to hurt you. Artemis reasoned. Dreg. Issei called his partner as a grin formed on his face. With pleasure the dragon growled. Welsh dragon balance breaker. Green light exploded through the clearing, while Artemis merely raised her hand. Some of her huntresses stumbled back from the force and power. Balance breaker, Artemis spoke with surprise as her eyes narrowed before she quickly ordered her huntress. Spread out. And support me. I will handle him. We have underestimated him. While drawing her bow and notching an arrow. Brag, let's do this. Issei roared as he threw his fist up and the familiar word boost began echoing through the forest. Artemis grit her teeth in anger. She had severely underestimated him. Tremble before the power of the Red Dragon Emperor before I drown you in the depths of Crimson Purgatory, Drake called out his own battle cry. Artemis's huntress notched their bows and her wolves howled. Isseihyoudou steeled himself for battle and would not kneel to the supernatural so easily. Chapter 11. I'm only human. The phrase boost continued echoing while Artemis grit her teeth. He definitely did not recently unlock the sacred gear. Her huntresses had leapt to the trees and notched their arrows, but they pinged harmlessly off his armor. The supernatural have grown fat off human suffering. Your very arrogance demonstrates why I hate the supernatural. You don't care for humans, you don't care about our lives. We are just pawns to be used as weapons, Issei growled with venom as he remembered Irina's death. She was just an ant to the supernatural, and she was crushed by Kuoh without remorse, without care he wouldn't be crushed. He had avenged her, and he would show that he was a force to be reckoned with. Artemis channeling some of her power into an arrow, let it fly before rapidly notching another one. It impacted Issei's scale mail with a sharp thud, but Issei only took one step back, she had poured too little power into it. The arrow lit up with a grey hue before it left Artemis's bow and a trail of power following after the arrow. It burned through the forest, creating a large barren plain having destroyed many of the trees. However, isseihyoudou dodged it quickly before charging the goddess. Her huntress let loose a barrage of arrows which did nothing to slow down the juggernaut. A trail of green power left in his wake as he charged like an immovable force. This was the power of the Red Dragon Emperor. Artemis was grateful that she drew the ire of the Red Dragon Emperor, her huntress would not be able to survive hits from him. He leapt into the air, his fist cocked back, Artemis quickly rolled out of the way. His fist impacted the ground and sent a shockwave of force blasting some of her huntress of their feet. Artemis dug her heels in and would not budge. The scale mail vision turned towards her, she could practically see the hatred in the emerald slits. This time she notched 3 arrows and quickly channeled her power into it before firing them in a spread. Issei leapt back and to the side dodging all 3, but Artemis, a testament to her skill, had already released another trio. He dodged one only to be hit by 2, he quickly raised his arms in defense. The arrows exploded on contact with his armor kicking up dirt and earth. He was flung back off his feet. He managed to quickly right himself. This is the power of a goddess, Issei mused internally as he gazed upon the goddess of the hunt, her bow already notched. Her amber eyes narrowed on him as her cloak blew gently in the wind. Focus on dodging, do not rely on the scale mail. It will protect you, but even dragon scales have their limits. Drake advised. Time to fire back with our power, Issei suggested. Show this goddess we aren't going to bow so easily. Drake roared in approval, the dragon getting fired up. Issei threw out both hands with palms exposed before the call rang out. Dragon shot. Evade. Artemis curtly ordered her huntress as 2 bursts of dragon energy blew through the air. The huntresses leapt acrobatically as did Artemis, but Issei and Drake grinned. The dragon shot suddenly split into smaller forms as they peppered the area, knocking out and wounding some of the huntresses. Artemis growled in frustration and anger as she surveyed her knocked out and/or wounded huntresses. Pull back. I'll handle him. Artemis ordered. They have severely underestimated him, and she would be damned if her huntress died, because her idiotic king thought it would be a good idea to force someone into your faction. We won't let you fight alone. One of her huntresses retorted. We will follow you into whatever battle no matter the odds. Another affirmed. Artemis bit her lip in frustration but also joy. She was happy she had such devoted followers, but frustrated they wouldn't heed her orders, they would only hinder her. You will stop her from fighting to her true strength, Issei suddenly spoke, earning looks of surprise, especially from Artemis. She would worry about you. Pull back, this fight is out of your leagues, Issei declared before a chorus of boost rang out as an oppressive armor began humming off his armor. The huntresses sent one look at their goddess before reluctantly pulling back, they backed off and lowered their weapons, but still continued to observe the standoff. Thank you, the goddess begrudgingly thanked him. You shouldn't lose people dear to you, especially when it can be prevented, he spoke honestly. All of a sudden, doubt began weighing on the goddess, and her will to fight began coming into question. She had doubts from the beginning, however, the more this continued the more she found her doubts being justifiable. Artemis was thrown out of her thoughts when her battle instincts kicked in, and she calmly flipped out of the way of a dragon blast. She quickly drew her bow and launched an arrow that exploded against Issei's armor, forcing him to stumble back as his armor took the hit. She quickly notched another arrow which he managed to avoid before leaping at her fist cocked back. She dodged once again, but the very ground where she was had cracked and cratered from the impact of his fist. Suddenly, he leapt forward once again, although this time faster. Artemis, caught off guard, received a scale mail-clad fist to the face, but a testament to the goddess' strength, she didn't take a step back. She then responded with her own vicious uppercut, cracking Issei's helmet and sending him flying several meters back. Issei clutched his face, feeling a large deep crack down the middle of his helmet. This was the power of a goddess. He snarled in annoyance before punching the ground in frustration before leaping at the goddess of the hunt. The goddess narrowly avoided his leaping attack, but was caught when he whipped his tail and hit her in the chest, stumbling the goddess, who was caught off guard. He then attempted to kick the goddess, but she managed to use her bow to deflect his kick before using it like a bat and slamming him in the chest. Issei's armor cracked slightly from the blunt force attack, but adrenaline was surging through Issei's veins, and he immediately grabbed the goddess' wrists with one of his own before headbutting her. A small cut appeared on the goddess's forehead as golden blood leaked. The calm goddess expression morphed into one of frustration before she counter-headbutted and cracked Issei's helmet in half, the helmet falling from his face. The human stumbled back and clutched his head, feeling as if he just got hit by a battering ram. A warm feeling coated his forehead and the right side of his face. Disengaging the armor on his left hand, he reached up to his face to wipe his face. His head was coated with a layer of his blood. Issei was taking deep breaths, feeling winded having exerted himself, but all he had managed was a small cut on the goddess's forehead. It felt pointless, all his exertions had culminated in merely annoying the goddess. Artemis flicked away the small itcher leaking from the cut on her forehead. It was a mere annoyance, but she had to say she was impressed. He had some fight to him, but she noticed he was winded, but even so doubt still festered, doubt on whether she could carry out Zeus's orders. The two faced each other, their eyes locking, brown clashing against amber. "You are taking your time, Artemis," a voice filled with malice and boredom echoed through the force. Everyone swiveled to look at the source. A massive man over 8 feet tall, clad in silver-spiked hoplite armor, the armor had blood and lava oozing from it. A pair of dark red eyes peered from behind the Corinthian helmet. "Ares," Artemis growled with distaste. The god of war, Issei muttered with realization, he was in a bad situation. Artemis was troublesome enough, but Ares and Artemis would be a shit show. "Father sent me, he feared you wouldn't be able to do as he requested." Seems he was right, nevertheless I look forward to fighting the Red Dragon Emperor. Ares spoke haughtily and full of cockiness. "Ares, this a stupid idea, we shouldn't force him to join us." "I had my doubts, but now I'm sure we shouldn't force him to join us," Artemis protested. "Humans are mere tools and objects to bend to our will." Ares spoke with disdain and disregard, Issei's fist clenched. He hated that they were so fat on their own power and age, they disregarded humans as insects. Reforming his helmet and snarling. Issei suddenly leapt at the god of war, fist cocked back, the god met the dragon's fist with his own. Issei's armor crumpled under the power of the god of war, a cocky grin framed the god of war's lips. "Weakling," Ares taunted. "Go to hell." Issei retorted before he shoved his other hand into Ares' face. Dragon shot. The blast of green energy hit the god of war and sent him flat on his ass. However, a silver blur quickly danced through his field of vision before a silver gauntleted fist smashed against his face, sending isseihyoudou tumbling. His armor screeching and buckling from the attack. His face armor had cracked, fully exposing his face. Issei quickly summoned the broken part of his helmet. He slammed his fist against the ground in frustration. "Pathetic and weak," Ares taunted. Issei grit his teeth in anger. Anger that Ares' words were true. "Issei, maybe we should pull back. We barely could handle Artemis, but if Ares is here as well." Drake began trailing off. "We are as good as dead," Issei muttered, coming to the same assessment as Drake. Artemis was merely observing, the doubts festering and weighing heavier on her. Artemis came to a simple decision, she would observe but not intervene. Ares would want the fight to himself, and it would relieve her guilt if ever so slightly, and give Issei a fighting chance. "Huntresses, we are to merely observe. We shall let Lord Ares finish the mission," Artemis declared, putting her bow on her back before backing away from the clearing. Her huntresses sent her questioning looks, but seeing the expression on their mistress's face answered them, she didn't agree with what she was tasked to do. Her huntresses were loyal to her and no one else, and once they knew of her decision and gleaned its reasoning, they agreed with it. Issei glanced to her, his face unreadable behind his helmet, but if Artemis had to guess, it was a mixture of thanks and surprise mixed with a bit of suspicion or wariness. "Indeed, Artemis, leave the job to men who actually know how to get things done," Ares insulted flippantly with a wave of his hand. The god of war quickly raised his hand to block a dragon shot Issei sent his way. The god seemed unfazed by it, and this only served to anger Issei more, who charged forward, unleashing a barrage of punches. Ares using his armored arms to deflect a barrage of punches with ease, but Issei didn't let up. Ares seemed bored, judging by his absolute boredom. "Weak and pitiful. I wonder how you even achieved balance breaker." Ares retorted before he counter-attacked and uppercut Issei, sending him tumbling and rolling across the floor after flying for a few meters. Issei lifted himself on his arms, but blood began dribbling down, soaking the ground beneath him. "Issei, we should." Drake's words were cut off as Ares' foot slammed onto Issei's back, slamming him into the ground. Issei's armor screamed against the armored foot, while Issei quickly tried to use his arms to stand up, but it was futile, he was completely at the mercy of the god of war. Issei grunted as he felt his armor slowly crushing around him. Artemis' fingers twitched in a mixture of doubt, should she intervene? It would ease her consciousness, but a rational mind screamed against it. He was just a human, and there was more for her to lose should she intervene, she would be in direct defiance of Zeus's orders. Her huntresses did not fail to notice the doubt on the goddess of the hunt's face. "So pitiful, so pathetic," Ares taunted with a sadistic grin as he savored Issei struggling beneath him. Issei struggled with all his might, but it was futile. He received a brief reprieve when Ares lifted his foot, only for him to be slammed down back into the ground as Ares stomped him. Issei's wills began crumbling as he squirmed beneath the god, using all his might to try and get away from Ares. It was useless. Then began the barrage, Ares slamming his foot again and again. With every slam, Ares insulted him. Scum slam, weak slam, pathetic slam. Issei's armor absorbed some of the damage, but Issei could feel his body screaming and his bones shaking as they threatened to snap. Yet he was silent, much to Ares' annoyance, but this was the sad truth about mortality. Isseihyoudou was experiencing a universal fear, a fear of death. His silence only egged Ares on more as he began stomping harder. "Let me hear you scream. Let me taste your fear. Damn it, Issei, get it two together." Drake roared, trying to snap his partner out of his fear-induced state. Issei's right hand dug into the ground, attempting to claw his way out from Ares' grip, an unconscious instinctual action, a desperate automatic move to preserve his life. Ares, while using one foot to keep Issei pinned, used his dominant right foot to slam down on Issei's wrist, and finally Issei's wall broke. A harrowing scream echoed through the clearing as Issei's armor finally cracked and his wrist snapped. Blood began seeping through the pores of his armor and soaking the ground beneath him. The scream shocked Artemis and her hunters, and the goddess was immediately thrown out of her thoughts. She reached for her bow out of instinct, but then again doubted it was the right thing to do, but sometimes the price of doing the right thing is high. Artemis hesitated. Ares let loose a bloodthirsty laugh before stomping rapidly, and this time Issei's armor cracked. Sharp snaps followed as Issei's bones broke, unable to withstand the force. Issei screamed as he felt his body contort and crack. His armor, unable to contain the blood seeping from his internal injuries, gave way like a dam as his blood soaked the ground beneath him. Artemis' face was locked in a tense expression as her and her huntresses watched what was essentially the torturing of the wielder of the boosted gear. He had attained balance breaker and that was an achievement, but Artemis came to the conclusion he lacked combat experience. Artemis had enough and she drew her bow and notched an arrow, but before she was about to channel her power into it, the blinding yellow light flashed onto the clearing and Ares and Artemis glanced up. Huntresses all took a step back in fear. There was Gabriel with her 12 angel wings shining holy light onto the clearing while also blocking out the sun. The angel's usually sweet and smiling face is replaced with a stone-faced grim expression of anger. Behind her were hundreds if not dozens of light spears pointing at the clearing. Even Ares froze at the prospect of so many light spears. Then suddenly the ground began freezing as if the cold fury of hell itself was manifesting. Everyone turned to the source to find Serafall, her eyes poised with fury and anger, while Behemoth stood behind her. The cracking of his knuckles echoed through everyone's ears. "Truce." Gabriel spoke calmly. True Serafall nodded her agreement as both women stared at the god of war, fury evident. Behemoth Serafall calmly ordered her only peerage member who didn't respond but acted. "You dare pick a fight with us?" Gabriel and Serafall. Ares roared, challenging, his hot-headedness coming to the forefront. You fool. Artemis was about to reprimand the god of war for taunting two high-ranking faction members, but was stopped dead in her tracks when Ares was lifted off the ground by the 8-foot behemoth. Ares immediately attempted to kick and punch the behemoth, who seemed unfazed, before he threw the god of war like a ragdoll, sending him through several dozen rows of trees. Only for him to be bombarded by dozens of light spears. The god of war, barely surviving, stood with golden ichor leaking through several cuts in his armor. "Artemis, get him out of here. This is the only time we will extend mercy." Serafall threatened as she walked closer to Issei's still form with Gabriel landing beside her. Artemis clenched her fist in anger at her brother's stupidity, but leapt at the chance to avoid the ire of two factions. "We apologize for our actions, Lady Serafall and Gabriel. I shall relay to Lord Zeus that the Red Dragon Emperor is under your protection." Artemis apologized politely with a light bow before she ordered her huntresses to leave and to take her shocked brother. Serafall and Gabriel spent no time flipping Issei over. Concern evident over their faces. "Ice." Gabriel called his name. "Issei, can you hear me?" Serafall asked as well. His eyes flickered open and shut, his vision blurry, but he could make them out. Serafall LG Abriel. He managed to croak their voices before coughing some blood and falling into the realm of unconsciousness, while Gabriel and Serafall screamed his name. Issei was in his mindscape sitting and his head hung in shame. Drake was behind him silent, the dragon's emerald eyes watching his partner carefully. "I am weak, Drake. Even after killing him, I'm still weak." Issei spoke to his dragon partner. "You have only sparred." Issei, "It's different to real combat. You faltered in experience, something which you can only gain with time, dear partner. You were overwhelmed, there was only so much you could do." The dragon comforted. Issei titled his head down and stared at his body. "Am I dead, Drake?" "I could feel it, the coldness, the fear, the loneliness." Issei asked the dragon calmly with resignation, accepting the fate he died. Issei expected a response from the dragon, but was surprised when he felt a pair of warm soft arms wrap around him. He froze in surprise, pausing for a few moments before a soft laugh filled his ears. "So much potential in this one Drake. It's unfortunate I could not meet him earlier." Issei glanced up to see a beautiful blonde woman with green eyes. She reminded him of Gabriel. "Elsha, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." Isseihyoudou. Chapter 12. The Destiny and Fate of the Red Dragon Emperor. Isseihyoudou just continued staring at the woman who just introduced herself as Elsha. She seemed so real, a lot more than just a figment of his imagination. I will leave you two. Drake broke the pregnant pause as the dragon disappeared in flames. Leaving the two humans, Issei disentangled himself from the women who had hugged him from behind, standing and turning around to face the women who too stood up. A gentle smile remained ever present on the woman's face. Am I dead? Issei asked, not really getting a straight answer from Drake. Elsha calmly shook her head. No, you aren't Issei, just unconscious. Probably for a while. Issei breathed a small sigh of relief. That's good to know, so you are Elsha. What are you doing here? Issei asked, wondering where this woman came from and why Drake seemed to know her. I was a boosted gear user. I was the strongest female user. The souls of past users get stored inside the gear. I luckily am one of the few who did not succumb to the curse of the Juggernaut drive, hence why we are able to have normal conversations. Elsha calmly explained. Issei took a moment to take it in. He was basically communicating with someone's soul. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you too, Elsha. He greeted back. The women acknowledged it with a nod before getting straight to the point. Tell me, Issei, why do you continue to impose suffering on yourself? Even now I can still feel it, your hatred, your loathing. You are lost, Issei, but only because you choose to be. Elsha calmly locked eyes with Issei, her words coming out measured and calm. Issei froze, taken back by her candid words. What do you mean? Issei asked, confused by her words. I mean what I said, you continue to impose suffering on yourself. You continue to grieve when you should be moving on. You keep shackling yourself to the past. Irina would not want this, Elsha continued, something in Issei snapped. Irina would not want this. Who are you to know what she wants? Issei shouted, but Elsha seemed unfazed. Who are you to decide what she would want? Issei continued as he stepped forward. Who are you to decide she would want you to continue suffering? You know her better than I do, but that does not mean I don't know of her. You really think someone who loved you would want you to continue suffering, wallowing away? Wasting your life, wasting your potential. Elsha replied calmly, not budging an inch. What potential? I had the potential to protect her, but I didn't, and now I just got my ass handed to me by a god of war. So much potential, Issei replied bitterly. Potential that has not been tempered, potential that has the chance to do great things. Potential to protect those close to you. Potential that you can attain if you only train yourself to realize it. Elsha pressed. What if I don't want to attain this potential? Do I not get a say in this? Issei retorted. You should stop seeing your power as a burden, it is also a boon. You have the opportunity to change the world, bring peace, crush those who would harm your friends or family. You see the responsibility that comes with your power, and that is what only a handful of previous users realized. That is what makes you better and someone who can change the supernatural world for the better. Elsha calmly explained. For the better? The supernatural world is just a pit of snakes, they take advantage of those weaker than them and despise human. It was that mantra that leads to Irina's death. Nobody gives a damn about humans. Then change that, isseihyoudou, change it, push yourself to your limits and prove to them humans are not to be trifled with, be an example for other humans, an example people in the supernatural can fear. Elsha stated. Issei sighed and locked eyes with the former boosted gear user. Even then I am not that ambitious, I just care about my friends. Gabriel, Zenobia, Rainer and Serafall. Issei sighed, thinking about the women he befriended, his voice lingering on Serafall. Then what are you going to do about Gabriel? She did confess to you, will you reject her? Elsha asked, her words making Issei bite his lower lip. I don't know, I never saw Gabriel that way, maybe I could in future. I don't know. But I'm not really looking for something right now. I am a mess, Issei muttered, not sure what to think. She could help you heal once and for all. But you need to stop pushing her away and you cannot ignore her feelings. Elsha counseled. Issei sighed. I freaked out and ran from her, but she still came to help me. She is a great fry person, I know that much, but whether she could be more I don't know. Gabriel is not the only one you can rely on. You have others. Elsha pointed out. Zenobia, Serafall and Rainer. Issei spoke their names, to which Elsha nodded. Issei began thinking about them in turn. Zenobia, she was always a good friend. Even when I pushed her away, she, like Gabriel, still cared for me. She will help me any way she can. And I need to apologize to her, I acted as if Irina's death meant less to her than it did to me. That was not fair and not right. Then his thoughts drifted to a certain magical girl. One of the four Satans dresses up as a magic girl. Issei spoke with slight disbelief, to which Elsha let out a small melodious laugh. Devils are known for the eccentricities. Elsha walked forward and placed her hand on his shoulder, their eyes locking. Take your time, Issei, and think it through. But I will no longer tolerate your own self-styled suffering and ostracism. The time for grief is over, the time for suffering is over, it is time to break free of your shackles and be reborn stronger and more determined than ever. You are Isseihyoudou, the Red Dragon Emperor, a human given a great boon. It is time you show them your resolve and strength as a human and forge a legend. A legend forged from his own determination and merits, and with the help of those around him, Aisha roused him. A few seconds paused of silence as Issei took in her words. His rather flat expression began morphing as he continued processing the words. She was right, he was wallowing for no reason, he didn't need to suffer any longer. There are people who care for him, people who could help him, he only needs to reach out. He needed to build himself up, get stronger and show the world, but most importantly protect his friends. Gabriel, Rainer, Zenobia and Serafall. He would get stronger, and he would protect them. A trademark goofy grin that had been gone ever since Arena's death had returned and formed on his lips, the white of his teeth evident as he clasped his neck. You're right, Aisha. It's time I show them who the Red Dragon Emperor is and can be. I will grow stronger and protect my friends. Finishing his sentence with a fist pump, Aisha just had a supportive smile at his declaration. Well, let's hope you will wake up soon. Sooner you can get trained. Oh yeah, I kinda got my ass kicked. Issei remembered with a small laugh. Back in the real world. Serafall was getting an intensive deja vu as she and Gabriel lay hunched over Issei, once again pooling their powers to heal him, their lower clothes once again soaked with his blood. Behemoth the towering being stood guard, his body tense in a defensive pose as he guarded his mistress and her friend. This can't keep happening to him, Gabriel Serafall spoke, cutting through the silence. I know. Her response was quiet and lacking vibrancy, tears stained her cheek at witnessing the man she loved once again at death's door. She blamed herself. If she hadn't told him, he would not have freaked out and left. Serafall would not have it. If Gabriel could not protect him, Serafall would take his protection into her own hands. He didn't need to suffer anymore, he deserved somewhere safe, a friend to look after him. Her heart ached at that word, a friend. A deep part of her knew what that meant, but she really did not want to entertain such notions. Especially considering the fact that he would not reciprocate if his reaction to Gabriel's feelings were anything to go by. He still needed time to recover, time to develop new feelings and time to accept others' feelings towards him. Serafall bit her lip, her feelings could come later. Right now she needed to ensure he first made it. This time he will be under my protection, Serafall stated, leaving no room for argument, but Gabriel was not about to argue either. His reaction to her words and the events that followed, she was to blame. She couldn't be near him, she needed to give him space, and she needed space to think about her feelings. He needed space to heal and to consider her words. Her heart ached at the thought being separated from the one she loved, but she needed to be, at least for a small while. Alright, it is probably for the best, the angel agreed, her joyful voice now somber. Someone's approaching, Behemoth growled, the hulking man facing a pair of trees. Gabriel and Serafall were immediately on alert. Now, Behemoth calmed down, an ever-calm voice cut through the tense atmosphere of the situation. Serafall and Gabriel were perplexed, to say the least. Tamamo. The women spoke with confusion at the same time at the leader of the Yaokai faction sauntering to the forest, her tail swishing behind her, her facial expressions concealed by her iconic fan. Yusaka following close to her mistress. Serafall, Gabriel. A pleasure to see you, ladies, again. Admittedly I wish it were in better circumstances, the kitsune calmly admitted as she stepped closer. Mistress. Behemoth called, seeking an order, his body still tense. It's all right, let them come closer, Behemoth. Serafall ordered her servant, who turned to continue surveying the forest, one part of him still turned towards the approached kitsune. The Satan and Archangel were confused as to why the leader of the Yaokai faction would be here, but they both followed her ever-calculating eyes, which were poised for Issei. I am here for the same reason you ladies are here, for the person currently bleeding beneath your hands, Tamamo admitted, casually coming closer to Serafall, Gabriel and unconscious Issei, till they were a few steps away. The two ladies tensed, an ambiguous answer as ever, but such was expected from Tamamo. Admittedly I'm not romantically attracted to him, but isseihyoudou is important to the future. I would rather he not die, it would be an inconvenience, to say the least. Tamamo offered an answer while leaving a question important for what in the future. We will discuss this later, Tamamo. Serafall begrudgingly letting go of her curiosity of what Tamamo needed Issei for, she would rather have her healing Issei than playing a verbal game of cat and mouse. Tamamo gave a barely noticeable nod before approaching a green glowing orb in her free hand. Yusaka, please ensure no one hostile gets too close, Tamamo requested her handmaiden. Yes, Mistress. Yusaka bowed slightly before assuming a defensive position across from Behemoth, as both beings stood guard. Tamamo now offered her healing power, and with their combined powers within moments, Issei's wounds were sealed. He however still lost a lot of blood and would be unconscious for a while. He is out of mortal danger for now, Tamamo confirmed, with Gabriel and Serafall nodding their agreement with Tamamo's assessment. I will go inform Michael what happened and that he is under your protection, but I will be back later to see him. Gabriel stood up first, her eyes firmly locked on Issei's unconscious form. Of course, you can see him whenever you like. Serafall would not deny her if she wanted to see Issei. Gabriel took one last look at Issei before leaving. A dove leaves and a crow arrives. Tamamo suddenly muttered calmly, earning Serafall's attention. Serafall found the women annoyingly cryptic and too reliant on thinking ahead, but she had to give credit. Tamamo was as cunning as they came. Issei? A female voice once again intervened in the clearing, and Serafall turned to face the source of the voice. She didn't recognize the women, but her instinct screamed fallen angel. Yo Serafall, so you found him? Azazel calmly greeted while beside him stood the silver-haired man she recognized as the White Dragon Emperor. As well as another tall gruff man with black hair, she recognized him as Bartender. Yes, I did, Azazel. She answered the fallen angel before glancing back to the prone form of Issei. Is he okay? The female fallen angel suddenly blurted out nervously as her violet eyes filled with concern started at Issei's unconscious form. Serafall's eyes bore into the fallen angel. Who was she to Issei? Yes, he is just unconscious. Tamamo, what are you doing here? The fallen angel leader, a bit suspicious of why the leader of the Yaokai faction would be here. He too, like Serafall, would always have reservations about the kitsune. She was just too damn cryptic. I am here for the same reason you all are. Giving practically the same answer she did to Gabriel and Serafall to Azazel. Tamamo's eyes then trailed to the silver-haired White Dragon Emperor user. Ah, the White Dragon Emperor, here to kill your rival while he is weak. Tamamo calmly questioned as her eyes narrowed in suspicion to the silver-haired devil, to which Volley gave her a look of annoyance. Of course not. There would be no fun in doing that. I would much rather battle him to the death when we both are at our highest potential. Volley's battle mania seeping into his response. Azazel just shook his head, used to such antics. Damn battle maniac. Azazel muttered. What happened here? Bartender inquired as he glanced around the destroyed clearing and the damage the ground suffered from multiple craters and marks. Artemis and Ares showed up. Zeus wanted the Red Dragon Emperor. Serafall stated succinctly. That old coot. We will be having a talk about that later. Azazel sighed, expecting such stupidity from Zeus. Serafall nodded in agreement. Lady Serafall, the female fallen angel addressed the Satan, who immediately turned her eyes to the fallen angel. May I approach Issei? I just want to make sure he's okay, the fallen angel asked politely and a tone filled with nervousness. After all, she was talking to a being who could obliterate her. Serafall's mind was racing. She obviously knew Issei, that much was certain. A friend at least, definitely not a lover but potential love rival. Serafall's mind froze. Where did that last idea come from? She would need to have some time to think to herself about her potential feelings. I am probably overthinking things, she mentally concluded. She glanced to Azazel, who gave her a small, almost not noticeable nod and mouthed a small please. So this fallen angel was important to Azazel. She stored that bit of information away for later. It wouldn't hurt, she concluded, but she would be watching the fallen angel like a hawk. Yes, you can. Rainer's heart was racing. What in God's name possessed her to request something from a Satan? She knew Issei was okay. After all, he did receive medical treatment from the two strongest beings in the supernatural world. But her heart screamed for her to get closer. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, and when Serafall said yes. It took a few moments for her to will her legs to move forward. She could feel Serafall and Tamamo and their bodyguards' eyes on her as she approached, but she could feel the comforting presence of Bartender and Azazel behind her. She took one step forward after the other, Issei's body getting closer, while the four people around him got more intimidating. The two bodyguards parted to allow her to walk closer till she was leaning over Issei's body. Serafall watching her like a hawk, but Rainer was this close and couldn't turn away. Issei looked peaceful, as if he was just asleep. But he was unconscious, and judging by the damage in the clearing, what he fought was no pushover. She wanted to step closer, run her fingers through his hair, gripping his hand and feel his warmth, but couldn't find it in herself to do so. Maybe it was being the presence of such being, or the fact she just requested something of the devil. She clenched her fist, her nails digging into her palm. She would have to bide her time a bit longer, but Issei was okay. That was what mattered. He was close but seemed so far. A few more moments passed before Rainer bowed her head. Thank you, Lady Serafall, before stepping back to Azrael, who gave her a small consolatory look before speaking. What's the plan now? I'm taking Issei under my protection for now, Serafall declared. How about joint protection? Tamamo added. We all seem to have a vested interest in Isseihyoudou. It would be best if he were protected, rather than just one of our factions guarding him. Tamamo followed up. I would not be against that. Bartender and Rainer will be suitable guards. Azazel agreed nonchalantly before turning to Volley. Volley, go inform Shemahazi of the situation and that we found Issei. Volley nodded and took one more glance at his rival. Recover well, my rival. I look forward to our fight, he muttered quietly under his breath before heading back to the headquarters of the Grigori. I have no objections either. We can contact Michael and he can send someone. Serafall had no objection before insisting, but he will be housed in the underworld under my roof and direct protection as one of the four Satans. Tamamo nodded her affirmation while Azazel stroked his chin before shrugging. He could see it in Serafall's eyes, she would protect him and look out for his interests. And even if they disagreed, Serafall would not have any of it. A pissed off Serafall would not be good for anyone. No objections here, but we have other matters to discuss as well, Tamamo declared, earning perplexed but suspicious looks from Azazel and Serafall. Whenever Tamamo had something to discuss, it was usually never good news. Behemoth had picked up Issei gently and brought him to the room opposite Lady Serafall and gently placed him on the bed and tucking him under the bed before moving to guard the door. Rainer took a seat by Issei's bedside and was the de facto nurse, while Barakel stood nearby to Behemoth. The veteran fallen angel was relaxed, but on guard, he would not slack on his duties. Rainer reached out and to touch Issei's face. He was warm to touch. She could feel Behemoth's eyes on her, but she wasn't going to hurt Issei, no way would she ever. She then slowly and gently, as if he were glass, and pulled a bang of his hair back before her head trailed down to rest on his cheek. His head tilted subconsciously into the palm of her hand and Rainer blushed a bit, rather embarrassed. She couldn't help but find such an action intimate despite the brooding Behemoth in the room. Barakel, the grim fallen angel, allowed the corners of his lip to twitch briefly before returning to his stoic expression. Rainer then proceeded to make sure he was tucked in properly and continued to monitor him. Well, Behemoth, following his mistress' orders, watched over the fallen angels and would be ready to incapacitate them should they harm the human. Down the hall, Serafall, Azazel and Tamamo were gathered around a table in the upper guest room. Tamamo was currently sipping elegantly on some tea, while Azazel was casually leaning back and enjoying the comfortable seat, but at the same time his ears poised towards the kitsune. Serafall's eyes were firmly glued on Tamamo as she sipped her tea, impatiently waiting for her to speak. The tea was lovely, Tamamo commended before placing down her empty cup of tea. Azazel could see Serafall was being impatient. So what's going, Tamamo? Whenever we talk, it's not usually for pleasant news. You are right, Azazel, it's not pleasant news. If I am right, it could be a major problem for all of us. Tamamo began cutting to the chase. I have been hearing rumors of an organization. They have been recruiting members. I haven't been able to identify their leader yet, but they are recruiting from the old Satan faction, and I hear higher-ups in the faction are involved. They have been recruiting human heroes as well and collecting sacred gears. Some rogue fallen angels have joined as well, some of Kakabiel's disgruntled followers, I believe. Serafall and Azazel were shocked. They had been hearing movement here and there, but nothing this organized. This was a serious failure in their networks of intelligence. The mood of the room went from tense to extremely serious. Tamamo, do you mean they intend to? Before Azazel could finish his sentence, Tamamo interjected, her pupils narrowed in seriousness. Or, Azazel and Serafall. War might just be a cover for their true intentions. But I have no doubt that violence will be on the agenda. Maybe, they began marshalling more intensely due to the closer relations growing between the three biblical factions. And it might be due to the reawakening of the Red Dragon Emperor. The table began cracking as Serafall sought once again to vent her frustrations. Had Issei not suffered enough? Once again he was the center of attention, once again people sought to use him. This was bullshit of a cosmic level. Toxic, Azazel growled, the kid couldn't catch a break. It is unfortunate, but isseihyoudou is now of paramount importance. We must ensure he doesn't join this organization. Tamamo continued. If anything, I would be more concerned about the White Dragon Emperor. He seems to have a propensity for combat. They could perhaps buy him with the promise of battle. Please do keep an eye on him, Azazel, Tamamo observed. I will keep Issei out of this. He will not be getting caught up in this. Serafall seethed. It matters not what you do, Serafall. The only thing I expect he is be kept out of their clutches. Tamamo declared. But I do believe no matter what you do, Serafall, he will always be drawn into battle, if not with this organization, with the White Dragon Emperor. Such is the fate of the Red Dragon Emperor. Serafall was silent as she brooded over how to protect Issei, but Azazel had one nagging question. What do they call themselves? Tamamo turned to the two of them. House Brigade. Serziches was currently seated in a heated discussion between the Phoenix and Gremory family. Riaz and Razor were screaming at each other like petulant children, but considering the situation, it was understandable. Razor wanted to force a girl into a marriage for her body and status, and Riaz wanted out for obvious reasons. He was sad on the sidelines with Grafia behind him. His poker face on, showing an impassive attitude, while internally he wished he could vaporize the runt, called Razor Phoenix for daring to force his precious Riaz into a marriage and then to take her purity unwillingly. Razor was scum that needed to be knocked down a peg. I have said it 100 times and I will say it once again. I will not marry you if you were the last man in the underworld and earth. Riaz howled. Have you no sense of duty? This marriage is important for all devil kind in our houses. Razor barked. A marriage that was made without my consent. Now, your family is trying to enforce it. Riaz retorted. Our family is trying to uphold. Razor countered. I believe this argument has gone on long enough. Both patriarchs of the family declared, silencing their respective children. Serziches continued observing, waiting, biding his time. He had a plan, but all he needed was the right moment. We made this arrangement and yes while it was when you were young. We must still uphold this marriage, Zeoticus Gremory reiterated. Indeed, as Razor said. Pure blood devil number is diminishing, this marriage would bring stability and increase the number of pure blood devils. Lord Phoenix added, but Riaz once again burst up to her feet and pointed at Razor. I want to marry a man I love. I want to marry someone who will love me for being Riaz and not a Gremory. Perfect Serzich's thought as he stood up. It is clear that Riaz does not want this marriage, and while yes this was arranged as an agreement. I have a suitor of great standing who has expressed interest in Riaz and who will benefit our faction as a whole. Serzich's declared, driving the room into an uproar as Razor, Lord Phoenix and Lord Gremory began protesting only to be promptly silenced by Lady Phoenix and Gremory. While Riaz looked surprised but quickly schooled her future she would trust her brother, he was against the marriage, this was definitely a way out. I would be interested in an alternative to Razor, someone I could develop feelings for. Riaz supported her brother's proposition. Serzich's smiled inwardly, Riaz was always clever, she had shown she wasn't against the idea, and now to seal the deal. Serzich's paused a moment, steeling himself with what he was about to do, the damage may be irreparable, but he needed to do this. I am sorry Serafall, I must do this for my Riaz. The suitor is the Red Dragon Emperor. Chapter 13. Underworld hath no fury like Serafall. It did not take long for the news to spread like wildfire. The underworld was in full buzz, a marriage of Gremory and dragon. An unholy alliance of power that sung to devil instincts. The Phoenix family were less than enthused, and Razor was frothing at the mouth to be presented with the suitor in question. Serafall's desk was the first to feel her wrath as she cracked the table in half. Her anger was so primal and raw she had lost control of her form. Serafall was no longer the adorable Loli, but rather a beautiful taller version of herself, a gaze that would seduce men who would look upon her eyes, long raven hair, locks and eyes of the finest onyx. An alternate form she would sometimes use for fun, and if she got angry enough she would alternate between either form, nicknamed by the asinine moron called Serzich's, Angry Serafall. I'm gonna kill him, I'm gonna kill him. What a fucking moron. That's what Serafall thought, but her inner devil couldn't help but applaud Serzich's had played it well. By announcing this not only had he told the whole supernatural realm that Issei was under their protection, but he also had generated interest in Issei, sucking him into the world of politics, whether he wanted to or not, but the worst part Issei would help him. Serafall knew it, he was too kind for his own good, and he would help, the poor boy who suffered enough would be sucked in once again to this bullshit world. Backhanding her already crumbled table to the side, her wall was now dented, Serafall just wanted to protect him, his smile, his joy, why couldn't she? Was she that weak? No, she wasn't. Fate was a bitch, and Serzich's was a dick. She growled in absolute frustration at being outplayed, at having not done enough. She was too complacent, she had relied on Serzich's being a decent friend, he had betrayed her friendship, but who wouldn't? She would do anything for her Sona, Serzich's would do anything for Riaz. It was that simple, family over friends. Summoning a portal she stepped into it without hesitation. The room flickered in incandescent light before she appeared at the Gremory mansion. Grafia expecting her was waiting, and all the other maids and butlers of the Gremory mansion probably scattered. Where is he? Grafia paused. Grafia was never scared, always ice cool before speaking. This way, he's expecting you. Of course, he was, Serzich's was a good friend, but damn it sometimes he was such an ass. Grafia and Serafall would walk side by side in silence for a bit longer. The silence was broken by Grafia. I hope you two can work this out. Serafall gave the maid a side glance from the corner of her eye, before giving a small sigh. Maybe, but Serzich's should not have done this, and you know it, Grafia. He cares a lot for Riaz, you know that. Grafia added, much to the chagrin. And? That doesn't excuse him, sure maybe explain his actions, but sure as hell does not justify it. Grafia was shut down rather harshly by the Satan. Their rather awkward conversation ended, mercifully quickly as they arrived at the doors to Serzich's office. Grafia opened the door and let Serafall in, going forward to see Serzich's seated behind his desk. Her eyes narrowed as they meet Serzich's, his eyes compassed as they always were, as befitting a Satan. She closed the distance in a few brisk steps as she crossed her arms, tilting her head a bit. Zetches she spoke rather coldly, fitting her mood. Serafall. I won't apologize, for it's rather hollow to do so. Of course it is, you ass. She bitterly retorted as he leaned back in the chair, a soft creak adding to the tense air between them. You did this all for Riaz, didn't you? Serafall guessed with ease. I did, and I don't doubt you would do anything in your power to protect Sona from a loveless marriage, he said smoothly, supremely confident in his words. His sapphire eyes glazed into a firm, uncompromising edge, but also cool and unfazed. Well, unlike Riaz, Sona actually tried to do something to avoid and fend off suitors. Riaz sat back and did pathetic attempts to do so. You as well didn't do anything till now. Serzich's grimaced a bit, he knew that was right. Riaz was a bit spoilt and laced Sona's intellect, but made up for it with a social edge. As much as he held Riaz up on a pedestal, he knew for a fact that she and Sona had their different advantages. Riaz was doing what she could. Serziches growled firmly, his older brother instincts kicking in. The big brother had to come to bail her out. Maybe if you argued from the beginning to cancel the marriage, she would not have been in that shit show of an arranged marriage. Serziches stood up and stared into her eyes. I could not do anything. But not or would not. We both know that there is always something to do. Whether it works is a different thing, Serafall lectured. What do you want me to say, Serafall? He sighed before he continued. I did what I had to save my sister. Save your sister? You jackass. You dragged an Issei into this. Without even asking him. You manipulated this from start to finish without concern for anyone but your own selfish goals. Selfish, huh? Serziches gave a small laugh. Me selfish? Aren't you being selfish right now, Serafall? He added. You can hide behind wanting to protect him, but is it not selfish cause you care for him and want him to be yours, and only yours you want to protect him? You have your own goals, I have my own agenda. Serziches stated with some finality and smugness. It's selfish to want to protect an innocent person. Someone who has suffered too much. Someone who needs a break. Serafall clenched her fists as she growled in anger, baring her teeth a bit at her friend. It's selfish cause you love him. Serafall paused, her body lurching a moment. Where did that come from? Love him? No, I don't, she promptly denied, scoffing at the incredulity of the words that just came out of Serzich's mouth. You do, just maybe you are not sure about it. Love and liking someone is confusing. Serzich's lecture calmly. Serafall was now pissed, he was just deflecting, she didn't like Issei. Or maybe she did. Regardless, it didn't matter. Even if she did like Issei, it did not detract from how heinous Serzich's act was. And? It's irrelevant, you know it, and if you want to make irrelevant, aren't you also being selfish cause of love for your sister? You just want to deflect. You know what you did is wrong, Serzich. I thought someone from the vaunted house of Gremory would care about humans, Serafall said venomously. Serziches smacked his hand down on the table. I care about humans, but at the end of the day, Serafall, my sister is more important than them. This was the best answer. I would not compromise myself politically. My sister would get a fake marriage with someone who, from what I can see, is a nice person, and the devils would get some powerful insulation when word spreads of the Red Dragon Emperor being a part of us. I did what I did for the benefit of the devil race, myself and my sister. Sure, it's a bit callous, but I did what I needed to do. The ends don't justify the means. If you say that we are no better than the old Satan faction, which we fought to destroy. Wise etches. You could have chosen another path, but you had to choose this to drag an innocent person who does not need to be or should be involved in this. Serziches let out a sigh before sitting back down as he leaned back on his chair. What's done is done, Serafall. I did what I had to do. By Serziches, you could have come to me, I could have helped. You could have done it without involving him. Serafall leaned forward, pleading for an answer. This isn't right, you have to fix this, she sighed as she shut her eyes and leaning forward onto his desk. You know I can't do that. Serziches spoke calmly and lowly. Serafall's eyes flared for a moment before in the blink of an eye she pulled her hand back and smacked Serziches across the cheek. The world seemed to pause for a moment before a loud sharp boom cut through the room. Serzich's desk and chair was obliterated, the Satan sent across the room. The glass windows showing the Gremory garden were blown out. Serzich's testament to his power managed to right himself as he was sent skidding across the room, his outfit shredded at the corners. Ice freezing over the skin of his cheek and a few blue crystallized lines running down his neck. His eyes flared for a moment as small bolts of destruction energy flared. The ice gently fizzing away. Braphia stormed in to see the scene before her. Serafall, Serziches calmed down. Serafall briskly turned on her step. There was no need for words. Serziches knew Serafall would find a way to pay him back. Serafall would finally arrive home, the angry stomping of her heels echoing through the halls and rooms. A miracle they hadn't broken yet, slamming her door with a loud thud that probably chipped the wood of it. She would let out a growling sigh as she flopped onto her chair, leaning back. Her eyes flickering shut as she massaged her forehead in exasperation. Serziches was an ass. She could sympathize with him, wanting to protect one's family. But do the ends justify the means? It was a moral gray area. She also questioned a part of herself. Why did she care so much? He's just a human. The supernatural, in general, did not care for humans. This was the rule, and anyone who did care is the exception. Was she being selfish? Maybe. Why did she care so much? Issei was at the end of the day a human. He was fun and charming, maybe the best part was that he didn't care who she was. He was just someone trying to live his life. He didn't care for power or money, he just cared for his friends. He also wasn't that bad looking. He made her heart race. Maybe Serziches was right, maybe she did like him, love him. That was a strong word, it held deeper connotations than it needed. Didn't seem to fit the situation either. She simply didn't know how to feel. Glancing over to her personal bar beside her desk. She would lick her lip. All the arguing had gotten her blood boiling and she was just really craving a drink right now. Moving over and just grabbing whatever alcoholic liquid in a bottle there was. She would grab a glass and pour the drink before popping it back. She could feel the sharp singe of alcohol on her tongue. Swallowing it with a small grimace on her face, she let out a sigh of disappointment. Alcohol just tasted better when he made it, she really wanted a magic girl cocktail. But what was she to do about Surshi's no one messes with her magic girl cocktail maker? And gets away with it, no one messes with Issei. Chapter 14. The Love Within. Time was a fickle thing within the boosted gear. It had felt like weeks since he had talked with Elsha. They had begun training. It was slow going, something was inhibiting him, his declaration about seeking to improve was true. He worked hard, Elsha had given him tips about the boosted gear and lectured him on how to channel his power. She had also instructed him in basic combat theory and told her of her own experiences fighting the White Dragon Emperor. But every time they brought him up, Elsha would lose her bubbliness. It was a sore spot for her. She was a kindred spirit in that regard, he could feel it, they both had something in common that begged the question. Why had she not told him about it? Was it not better to speak about these things instead of bottling them up? That felt hypocritical coming from him. For all the training they had done, he felt like despite his declaration about wanting to improve, he still felt the last vestiges of Irina in his heart. He wanted to move on, but it felt so wrong. So improper to do so. He wasn't sure his head was still a mess. It didn't help that his thoughts drifted to other women, Zenobia, Rainer, Gabriel and Serafall. Gabriel confessed to him she loved him, did that meant the other women did as well? No, probably not, but that does not mean they may not have feelings for him. Did he have feelings for them? Did it matter when he could not move on? As he sat down, his face glued to the floor, his mind wandering, his eyes glazed over. He felt a presence near him. Glancing up he could see Elsha once again. They paused for a moment, but then she spoke. "Walk with me Issei," she encouraged, finally getting his legs moving. They walked and walked as Issei was about to open his mouth. The world seemingly changed before them, sucking in a deep breath of what seemed like fresh air. The blankness of the sacred gear was replaced by greenery and grass. Long trees began filling the dirt path before them. "Where are we?" Issei asked Elsha, who gave no response. The path gave way to a sizable village surrounded by a wall, various pathways entering it. The village was destroyed, craters peppering it, he could see bloodstains everywhere. Issei's eyes glanced to the center of the destruction, before he could see anyone he heard it. An anguish wailing filling the air, his eyes stared at the source. It was a person, he could see flicks of dirty blonde and dashes of purple cradling something. He glanced to the women to his side. "Is?" He tried to speak, but she caught him off. "That is me." He stared at the memory of the women before him, his heart wrenched. The wailing, the anguish, it was familiar, it reminded him of Irina and himself. But why did she show him this? Why? He asked, the word in of itself was explanatory of what he meant. "I wanted you to know that you aren't alone. Every wielder of the boosted gear or divine dividing goes through some form of tragedy. It wise most of them fall to the tempting allure, dragons are addicted to it. Wrath and revenge are like drugs to them, they fed on it and live off it. But where does that leave the wielder?" Elsha began. "Greg has grown attached to you. He has come to realize that behind his petty rivalry between him and Albion, there are people who suffer. People he comes to see almost like his own children." She began walking and the world began morphing again, this time the room quickly filled with a warmth emanating from several candles. Giggling filled the room as a young child hugged the memory of Elsha, a smile on her face as a man came to her. He could see love in her eyes, she was happy. "Is that why you brought me here? To tell me to move on, be happy?" He asked softly as his eyes glanced to the floor. "Yes, Irina would not you wallowing in pain." "I don't want you wallowing in pain, Drake doesn't, your friends don't, Zenobia, Rainer, Gabriel and Serafall. These women are important to you, are they not?" She asked, turning to glance at him, crossing her arms. "It does not feel right to move on, but it also does not feel right to sit around and suffer. But it also feels right, almost like a penance. I failed her. I killed Kakabiel, I will kill him every night in my dreams till the day I die. But it won't bring her back." He felt a hand reach out and squeeze his shoulder. He flinched a bit before staring up at Elsha, their eyes leveled against each other. "And? If you can't bring her back, why don't you live the rest of your life honoring her by being happy? You want to forgive yourself, isseihyoudou, you want to forgive yourself for your failures, but you won't. Not unless Irina forgives you, but again you know that will not happen. Will she be happy if you fell for it, Juggernaut Drive? Your life cut short. Your life nothing but a shadow of its former self, then you don't truly remember who Irina is or who she was." Issei's fist would clench, he wanted to raise his hand and smack hers away, scream at her, yell at her. But why? Was she saying anything wrong? No, she wasn't, and that itself was sobering. I miss her so damn much," he muttered as he clenched his chest, feeling his heart retching and thumping. He wished he could bring her back, with all his might. What good was the power of the boosted gear if he could not bring her back? Why was his chest feeling hot? His breathing coming out in ragged gasps. Elsha reached out to make sure he did not fall to the floor. But suddenly the woman was blasted back and the world seemed to change again. The world went black, he was falling, he opened up his mouth screaming. It was only natural, right? He felt like he was going faster and faster, but he stopped. Something grasped his hand, then when he glanced up his breath hitched. The pair of violet eyes stared back into his own brown ones. Ice, that one word had its effect, hot tears began streaming down his face. He could see it all again, a beautiful chirpy smile, those violet eyes paved in comparison to the finest jewels. Her locks of light brown hair framing her face. But that wasn't all, the pair of angelic wings sprouting from her back and the halo above her head. It had him gaping like a fish. "Irina?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. She smiled back and nodded before swooping lower, scooping him into her arms. She seemed so real, his hands reached out grabbing her, he was half expecting for his hands to phase through her body. His heart leapt in his chest when he didn't, she felt so warm, so comforting, so real, but he knew she wasn't. "But how?" he asked, her wings folded inwards cradling him. Her hands moving to cup his cheeks and hold his face. Her thumbs brushing away his tears as they streamed down his face. "Well, I am dead, Ice, just I am alive in a way." She whispered back, her eyes never leaving his. He wanted to speak but he just waited, listening to her words with bated breath. She reached a hand down, her smooth skin brushing against his own. Causing his heart to lurch, she went lower and lower till she flattened the palm of her hand against his chest. "I am alive inside you. I was always there, just I never could manifest," she spoke, keeping her hand pressed to his chest, soothing his beating heart. "So it's your conscious. I guess you could say that, Ice," she smiled calmly. "Michael tried to keep my soul alive, he wanted to give you the chance to speak to me. But he couldn't do it properly, only God could. I guess he has other plans for me, eh?" She joked, her eyes always so earnest, never wavering in their warmth or genuineness. "But God is dead, Irina, this doesn't make any sense," he said, biting his lips as the words left his mouth. Fuck, he didn't want to say that. He should just be happy. Yes, he may be dead, but can a being as powerful as him truly be obliterated? "I don't think so, Issei, I think he's there influencing fate where he can. The vestiges and spirits of him live on," she elaborated. A few moments passed, but Issei felt her hands tense as she grabbed his face. He tried to open his mouth, but he found his lips quickly captured. His heart thundering in his chest, their lips meeting once again. Issei shut his eyes as he reached his own hands up to grab her face, intertwining their hands as he held her close. Pressing his lips as close to hers as he could, he savored the moment. Her lips tasted exactly as he remembered them, soft as silk, but it was the vanilla she always tasted of vanilla. His lips moving over hers, re-exploring every inch of them, this moment being seared into his mind for eternity. They held close, both of their lips pressed together, sharing a much-needed and wanted kiss. They broke it for a moment, Irina pressing her forehead to his. Their lips brushing against each other, yearning for their respective touch. Their eyes never parting from each other, lost in this intimate moment. Her wings cradling him, he felt safe and loved in her embrace. He then began bawling, his lips quivering as he wailed, it was so raw and so human. Irina immediately grabbed the back of his head and grasped his hair. Humming softly as she pushed him against her chest. Letting him cry, she kissed his cheek softly. His arms grabbing her, digging into her body. He would never let go of her. His whole body shaking with the force of his crying, vibrating and shaking against her. Letting out ugly huffing wails as tears stained Irina's chest, not that she cared. Her fingers running through his locks of hairs, gently soothing her crying partner. She hummed gently, her voice angelic as he remembered. It made him sob a bit harder, in all honesty. His head resting on her chest, he could feel her heartbeat. She felt so real, but a part of him told him this was all a lie. A mirage, a facade he concocted to absolve himself of guilt, to allow him to move on. Allow him to see her one more time. "I am sorry for not seeing you earlier, the seal you placed on yourself didn't let me. I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me either. I didn't want to open fresh wounds like I am now," she said softly. Issei tilted his face up to stare into her eyes, he could see tears streaming down her face now. He reached out to quickly wipe them away. "Please, Irina, don't cry, I don't deserve you crying for me," he pleaded with her, his heart breaking in his chest at the sight of her crying for him. "I cry because I love you, Ice, nothing more, nothing less," she told him, tears continuing to cut a path down her skin. His fingers quickly brushing and rubbing against the tears, trying to wipe them away, tears that did not seem to stop. "Irina, I did something, please don't cry for me. I don't deserve it, I don't deserve you." He continued to beg, tears beginning to stream down his face as well. As both cried, both of them overcome by a raw surge of emotions. She paused for a moment and he held his breath in his throat, wanting to crawl away and die in shame. "I know, Ice, but I forgive you. I forgive you, you know I always will now and until forever." Rainer stared down at the still form of Issei. Barakiel was seated down in the corner, the older man having been used to such monotone duties. But they both felt on edge as to the other person in the room. Her mere presence radiating purity and holiness, the Archangel Gabriel. The Archangel seemed to be holding a vigil for Issei, not moving an inch from his side. She had been doing this for days. Reiner could see it, she held love for the man before them. But she could see a glint of doubt in her eyes. A mixture of wishing for him to wake up but also a fear to discuss something. What could it be? The way she stared at Issei was similar to the way she has been. Bartender also wasn't subtle about it with his rather dad-style jokes. Admittedly it was a lot better than Azazel's jokes, that man was crass as they came. It did not take long for Reiner to come to the astute observation that Gabriel loved isseihyoudou. A part of her thought the idea was adorable, Gabriel had always been duty-bound and a kind woman, but her inner fallen angel flared in an age-old acrid feeling, jealousy. She was jealous that Gabriel loved Issei so purely, or was she jealous that Issei could not be hers alone and that she would always have someone longing for him? Did she love him? The word itself had an allure, but asking someone to define it and give you a good answer is a pain. She at the least liked Issei, well, when she stared into the Archangel's eyes it was love. Anything else would be unfitting of Gabriel. Bartender would stand up clearing his throat, her violet eyes immediately flicking to her superior. Reiner, come along now, I want to grab a drink. Can I get you anything, Gabriel? The angel's eyes flicked to the corner of her eyes looking at the elderly fallen angel. No, I am good, but thank you for your kindness, Bartender. Her voice sounded sad, or as sad as an angel full of love and joy could manage. Bartender would open the door and step out. Reiner began moving her feet, glancing once more over her shoulder, once more at the lifeless still form of isseihyoudou. Her eyes moving back to Gabriel, at least he would be in safe hands, just not her hands. Bartender would hand Reiner a hot cup of coffee, the liquid almost bubbling in its mug as wafts of steam arose from it. The fallen angel would pull a bang back behind her ear. Thank you, she muttered to her superior. The elderly fallen angel letting out a breath as he took a sip of the drink. How are you doing? He would ask plainly. I am doing alright, although seeing Serafall makes me nervous. She appears to be on a warpath, and being near Gabriel for so long is a bit unsettling, she admitted frankly to her superior, who nodded in understanding. Is that the only reason? Reiner reeled back from such a poignant answer. Her purple eyes flicking to the gruff-aged form of Bartender, who seemed wholly content to stare at the wall before them. I was once in love myself, Reiner. So I know love when I see it, or a crush at the very least, he grunted. The female fallen angel gulped and glanced to the side. You aren't the only one. Gabriel seems enamored and Serafall potentially. Quite a situation the young man is in, he continued. Reiner's eyes flicked to look at the older fallen angel's expressions. Thanks for confirming my suspicions, I guess. She spoke, not entirely sure of what to make of the conversation. No problem, he replied without missing a beat. Why do you like him? He continued. The fallen angel would tilt her head to the side, chewing her lower lip. Why did she like Issei? It wasn't a stupid question. If anything, it was a valid question. And one she asked herself that many times. The part of it is the fact he is cute in his own way. That goofy smile of his has its allure, you know. He is kind, he didn't see me like a piece of meat or objectify me. He would ask about me, plus he made me laugh. Did all that despite carrying so much pain. Is it love? I am not sure. Maybe. Do I like him? Yes, I do. And a part of it is that he just makes my heart race, she whispered the last part, the skin of her face turning a shade of pink. She turned to Bartender, who just gave a glimpse of a smile tugging on the corner of his lips. What are you smiling about? Nothing. He said with a small smile, making Reiner slightly aghast before she burst out into laughter. I am sure the Grigori would all love to know that the venerable stoic Bartender is a joker no less on the matter of love. She teased, causing the slightly older fallen angel to roll his eyes. Won't be as juicy as the rumor of you loving the Red Dragon Emperor, eh? I can even see a love story being written about it. Reiner let out a gasp. You wouldn't dare. Bartender let out a small laugh before continuing to sip his coffee as the two enjoyed an amiable conversation. Gabriel's eyes glanced over the still form of the man she loved, isseihyoudou. She had failed him again. Again, it was such a bitter word and sensation. She failed him when Irina died. Failed him when he devolved into sadness, failed him when they failed to avenge Irina. It took Gabriel coming to find Issei for revenge to finally be delivered. Then now Ares had nearly taken him away from her, hell would not save that god from her wrath. Why did he always get nearly taken away from her? A small part of her wondered, did she not deserve love? Was this God, no fate's way of making sure she didn't fall? Or maybe she was fated never to fall in love. Now here she was once again, standing vigil over Issei. Once again, only looking but not able to touch. Not able to feel. She glanced down and reached out, her fingers were so close, she could feel the warmth of his skin. Pausing for a moment, it felt like the world stilled for a moment. Her breath hitched in her throat, she would move her fingers up to brush back his locks of hair away from his face. He was so still, she was just taking care of him, there was nothing wrong with that. Flattening her hand, she curved it out around his cheek, cupping his cheek. She felt something wet and hot stain her cheeks. She was crying from being too close to the man she loved, the man who didn't know how to react to her confession. "I love you, Issei, please wake up." She spoke, there was only him and her. Her heart yearned for him. It was selfish, a part of her knew that she wanted him to wake up so he could answer her question, but also so she could see him. See him smile, talk to him, hear him laugh. Her own hands felt wet, she stepped back as she Issei crying. Why was he crying? She began poring over his body, seeing if there was anything wrong with him. He was physically fine, that was not in doubt. That was when Gabriel fell silent, her whole body frozen as she felt something that she did not expect. Holy magic, her eyes widened as she froze in disbelief. A translucent form hugged Issei's form, she recognized who it was in a heartbeat. Irina. Gabriel's heart swelled, how was this possible? It was a miracle. This was Irina and her soul. She could tell just by a glance if so, how or why did she show up now? Her thoughts were quickly cut off though as she saw Irina lean down and press her lips to Issei. Her spectral hands cradling Issei's face. She was only silently able to watch, it was a miracle right before her eyes. Gabriel had seen many miracles in her lifetime, but this one felt more special than any other. Irina tilted her face down to kiss Issei, Gabriel's heart clenched at the sight. Their love was pure and honest, it did not deserve to be cut off so young and early. It was a shame and proof despite all of Gabriel's omnipotent power she could not save everyone, but what made it sobering was she couldn't save those that were close to her. But there was something else, she felt something gnaw at the core of her. A foreign feeling, one an angel herself has not experienced. It was counseled as one of the most grievous sins, jealousy. Why was she jealous? Is this the double-edged sword of love? Grabbing her chest for a moment as she sucked in a deep breath, trying to calm herself and stave off the gnawing feeling. The warm feeling soon overcame her, tilting her face up. She came face to face with Irina. "Be happy, Gabriel," Irina whispered in her ever-warm cheery voice. Tears once again began staining the face of the archangel. Deep heaving breaths being sucked in as she sobbed. "Don't worry, I will always watch over you and Issei. After all, I am going to be closer than everyone thinks." Irina spoke mysteriously. What do you mean, Irina?" Gabriel asked, her head swiveling upwards. "It's just a feeling. Take care, Gabriel, and take care of him." Irina spoke one final time before her ethereal form began to grow more translucent and continued fading. Gabriel stood motionless, knowing she would not be able to do anything to stop Irina from disappearing. "Irina," she whispered her name as she finally disappeared. The room fell into a crushing silence as Gabriel clenched her racing heart. However, she felt a surge of holy power in the room, her eyes flicked over to Issei's body. She let out a gasp as Issei's still form began glowing in hues of gold and white. The door behind her slammed open, Serafall stood in the doorway. Eyes narrowed at Gabriel before back to Issei. "Gabriel, what's going on?" Serafall asked coolly to her rival archangel. Gabriel glanced over her shoulder to look at her rival. Their eyes meeting for a moment. Gabriel knew the answer without skipping a beat. "The miracle," the archangel spoke, causing Serafall to furrow her eyebrows. Moving into the room, two other forms quickly appeared behind her. Rainer and Barakiel quickly stormed in as well. Their eyes coming to rest on the incapacitated Issei. Despite having fallen from grace, the fallen angels still resonated with holy power and if anything yearned for it. They all watched with bated breath as a gentle hum of holy power began filling the room, growing in power and tempo. The room growing brighter and brighter. Their eyes beginning to wince while Serafall tensed a bit. Before the room completely died down and the power was gone. They all glanced at each other unsure. Their eyes were drawn to movement as isseihyoudou came to a half-sitting position. His eyes opening wide, once hues of chocolate brown were now an amalgamation of purple and brown. Everyone was speechless as their eyes were drawn above, a pair of golden arms wrapped around him protectively as angelic golden wings coated him. The visage of a smiling angel with a halo above her head. Issei's hand reached up to grasp hers, the boosted gear glittering as the emerald gem in the middle pulsed. The avenging heavenly dragon has awoken. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.